This is not just a story about danger, it's a story about manipulation at its deepest level. For 5 years, Emma's life was carefully controlled by a man trained to study her, understand her, and ultimately break her. Every emotion she felt might have been part of a plan, but when love starts becoming real, the mission becomes deadly. And now psychology turns into survival.
The funeral for my father was just ending when a gravedigger gently touched my arm. He whispered that the coffin was completely empty and this was part of an old plan. He thought my dad had lost his mind. He then gave me a worn key with a quiet warning about my husband. He told me I had to go to storage unit 20 right away. What I discovered in that unit completely changed my life. I knew then that to survive, I had to escape the man I had married. Thank you for listening to my story. If you can relate to it, please like this and share where you are watching from. I make sure to read every single one of your comments. This story was inspired by a true story, but the names have been changed to protect everyone. Your support means the world to me. I had just finished my eulogy at Austin Memorial Park Cemetery when his rough hand stopped me. The words I spoke felt like heavy stones in my throat. In that moment, my entire life changed. His voice was low and urgent. He said we had to talk. I tried to dismiss him while looking for my mother. I saw her standing by the car with my Aunt Susan. People were moving toward their cars like dark shadows under a gray sky. I told him this was not a good time to talk. He replied that the casket is empty. My world felt like it was turning upside down. I could not process what he was telling me. Empty. The same coffin I had just stood beside, the one I touched while promising my dad I would take care of my mom. It was supposed to be holding Raymond Martinez, my 62-year-old father, who died from a heart attack only 3 days ago. That is not a funny thing to say. My voice became sharp, my legal training pushing past my sadness. I accused him of making a cruel joke. He insisted it was the truth, glancing around nervously. The other workers were too far away to hear our conversation. Vincent said my father came to see him 20 years ago with a letter. His weathered hand was shaking just a little. Dad instructed him to keep it in a safe place. If Dad ever needed to disappear, I was to be given that letter and a key. 20 years. That number sent a chill through me. I was only 14 years old at that time, just starting high school. But 5 years ago, my father returned, Vincent went on. He made changes to the plan and gave him a large sum of money. He said the threat was getting bigger because a dangerous person was now part of my life. He said that this person was getting much too close. I first met David 5 years ago. I pointed out to Vincent that I saw my father's body at the viewing. My own voice sounded strange to me. Vincent explained that I saw precisely what I was meant to see. A cold sensation spread through me, despite the warm Texas weather. This man, with his weary eyes and dirt caked fingernails, was either telling the truth or he was deeply unwell. I told him I was calling the police. I started to reach for my phone, but Vincent Hayes, whose name I remembered from the cemetery papers, shook his head no. He pressed a cold, small piece of metal into my palm. He said my father knew I would try to call for help. As a lawyer, he knew I would demand proof. He knew I would need everything to add up. He told me to take the key and it would make everything clear. I looked down at the old brass key. The number 20 was stamped into it. I asked him what it was for. He said it was for Unit 20 at Lone Star Storage on South Congress Avenue. My father was there waiting. Vincent then held up a faded envelope. My name, Emma, was written on it in my dad's very distinct handwriting. I recognized that writing from every birthday card he ever gave me, and even from the title of my very first car, 2 decades ago when I was just 14. My father, who was a detective, was already creating a way to escape. But when David entered my life 5 years ago, my dad knew the threat had become real. That was when his true plan was put into motion. My phone made a noise, but I did not look at it. I just stared at the envelope as if it were a bomb. Vincent's face was pale and he kept looking over at the parking lot. He told me to leave immediately. Do not stop at home first. My dad had been very clear about that instruction. I told him that my father was gone, but the word felt empty because I no longer knew what was true. Vincent gently squeezed my arm. He pleaded with me to read the note inside and go to Unit 20. He said my dad insisted that this was a matter of life or death. He was gone before I could say anything else. The sound of his steps faded as he walked away between the headstones. I stood there by myself with a key and a letter. An empty coffin was behind me, waiting to be buried. My mother was waiting for me in the car up ahead, confused. My phone buzzed again. My hands shook as I tore open the envelope. The old seal gave way easily. There was a single page inside covered in my dad's writing. The very first line almost made my knees buckle. Emma, if you are reading this, it means I had to disappear. Tears made the rest of the words blurry. But a few phrases stood out. Vincent gave you the key. Everything in here is the truth. I am terribly sorry. Go to Unit 20. And then, written in large letters and underlined 3 times, was the sentence, do not go home. Not until you have seen the unit. Not until you know the facts. The letter warned that if David sends a strange text message asking you to come home, you must not go. My phone buzzed a third time. I shakily glanced at my screen. 3 messages from David, my husband for 5 years, the same man who held me and comforted me last night. The first one said, Emma. The second, where are you? The third was, come home now. That was it. No sweetheart, no darling, no words of concern. It was an order, cold and blunt. I looked again at the letter, the words a blur. The last sentence felt like a punch in my stomach. They have your mother. I will explain everything. I love you, my girl. Go to Unit 20 right now. Wait. Son. My dad had written the word son, but I am his daughter. Did he make a mistake? No. The envelope was clearly addressed to Emma in his own writing. It was meant for me. The word son must have been a mistake, or maybe, and my heart began to pound, maybe he did it on purpose. A small detail to prove that this was real, written in a great hurry, a mistake he left in, hoping I would never have to read this letter. I could hear Vincent's warning playing over in my mind. If you get that text, you have to run. I looked at my phone again. David's words seemed burned onto the screen, demanding I come home. Something was terribly wrong. It was more than just his tone, it was a feeling deep inside me. My own intuition was screaming. I read my dad's letter one last time with a shaky hand. I carefully folded it, put it back in its envelope, and dropped it into my purse next to the key. I did not walk toward my mother. I did not walk toward our car. I turned and walked the other way, toward the edge of the cemetery where my car was parked by itself. My phone began to vibrate with a call from David. I did not answer it. Behind me, a coffin with nothing inside was being lowered into the ground. Ahead of me was a storage unit that held answers I was afraid of. And somewhere in the middle of it all, my father was either alive or I was losing my mind. I got into my Honda and locked every door. I saw David's black Audi drive into the parking lot in my rearview mirror. He was here, searching for me. He was here. I turned the key and my heart hammered in my chest. I hoped that whatever was in Unit 20 was worth taking this kind of risk. I was choosing to trust a letter from a man I believed was dead over my own husband. That was the most terrifying realization of all. All by myself in the car, I forced myself to read the entire letter one more time. My hands were still trembling as I unfolded the letter again. The first time, I had just scanned it in a complete panic, my thoughts screaming that this could not be happening. Now I had to understand the details. In my mirror, I saw the last of the cars pulling away, their headlights slicing through the Austin twilight. My doors were locked and my engine was running. I could smell the scent of fall leaves through my slightly open window. My dad's handwriting was right there. Emma, if you have this, I am alive, but I had to disappear. What I am about to tell you is the complete truth. 2 decades ago, my decisions put our entire family in danger. I thought that danger was in the past. I was wrong. 5 years ago, a new man came into your life. You call him David Miller. That is a fake name. He was sent to get to me by harming the person I love more than anyone else, and that is you. I found out the truth 6 months ago. I was working with the government, but the threat became much worse. The only way to keep you and your mom safe was to disappear. I needed to let them think that they had won. David is not who you think he is. It is possible he has grown to truly love you, but that does not lessen the danger. In fact, it makes the danger much greater. If you received an unusual message from David telling you to come home, do not listen to him. They are aware that I am alive. They are using him to get to you. Go to Unit 20 at Lone Star Storage on South Congress. You will find Agent Michael Carter inside. He is aware of everything. You need to go right now. You and your mother are in extreme danger. I am so sorry. You will never be able to understand how sorry I am, but I did all of this to protect you. Trust Carter. Follow your instincts. Dad. I went over the note one more time, my lawyer's mind looking for a flaw. The writing was without a doubt my father's. His particular apology, you will never know how sorry I am, was a phrase he only ever used for his deepest regrets. He said it when he missed my birthday or a school performance. The man I was married to, David Miller, was not the person he claimed to be. We had been together for 5 years and married for 3. The sunlight flashed on my platinum wedding band. My entire life was a lie. My phone vibrated, breaking the silence and making me jump. I answered it on pure reflex. Mom, are you all right? The call went right to her voicemail. I heard her familiar Texas accent asking me to leave a message. She had not picked up. My thumb had automatically dialed her number out of habit. Mom, it is me, I said calmly after the beep. I need you to call me back right away. It is an emergency. I paused, unsure what else to say. Please. I hung up and tried again, but it went straight to her voicemail. My mother never missed my calls, not on a day like this one, unless something was wrong with her phone, or worse. A figure appeared in my rearview mirror. A tall man was crossing the lot, peering into the windows of cars. It was David. My mouth went dry. He was looking for me, only about 50 yards away, and checking every single car. I ducked down in my seat, my heart hammering against my ribs. My Honda was a common silver, but he would know the license plate or the law firm sticker on the back window. He began walking my way. I had maybe 30 seconds. I thought of the service road, the other exit. An instinct had made me notice it earlier. I put the car into drive without turning on the lights and crept forward, using the parked cars as a shield. David looked up at the sound of my engine, but two other cars were leaving through the main gate. I went the opposite way. David broke into a run, phone still pressed to his ear. The moment I was clear of the gravestones, I floored the accelerator. Branches scratched the car's side, gravel shot out from the tires. I raced through the open gate onto a quiet residential street. I took a fast right, then a left, putting distance and turns between us. Finally, I switched on my headlights and took a ragged breath. My phone began to ring. The screen lit up with David's name. I let it ring. It rang a second, third, and fourth time. After the final attempt, I set the phone face down and just kept driving. I grew up in Austin and knew these back roads well. Losing him would be easy. The ringing stopped, and the car was quiet once more. Then a text message illuminated the screen. I knew I should not look, but I peeked at a red light. Emma, please. I know you are confused. I can explain everything. Just come home. I love you. A second text followed instantly. We have to talk about the baby. The world tilted on its axis, worse than when Vincent told me the coffin was empty. The baby. Just 3 days ago, a pregnancy test had come back positive. I had cried with joy in the bathroom, looking at the two pink lines while David was gone. I had tucked the test in my purse, ready to surprise him after the funeral. No one else knew. Not my mom, not my best friend Sarah, not even my doctor. It was a secret between me and that little plastic stick. So how could David know? The light turned green, the car behind me honked. I hit the gas, moving on autopilot. Our house. Did he go through my purse? That was impossible. The test was in my glove box, tucked inside a receipt. Unless he had searched my car, unless he had been searching all of my things for some kind of leverage, something to hold over me. My father's warning echoed in my mind. He was sent into your life to destroy me by hurting the one person I cherish most. My phone vibrated with another call. This time, I did not even glance at it. I turned onto South Congress Avenue and headed for Unit 20, toward a truth that would shatter my entire life. The storage place was just 10 minutes away. My husband was out there in the growing darkness hunting for me, and he knew I was pregnant. The question was not how he found out, it was how long he had known, and what other secrets was he keeping. A 30-minute drive across town brought me to a tall fence that enclosed rows of bright orange doors. Lonia Storage was a massive complex just off South Congress. Metal buildings glowed under security lights against the darkening sky. The entire property felt deserted. All the businesses nearby were closed for the evening. A couple of cars were scattered in the lot. I could not be sure if they belonged to other renters or to the person I was meeting. I parked by the front office and killed the engine, hearing the faint ticking sound as it cooled. I was about to open my door when a sharp knock on the window made me jump. My heart leaped. A man stood next to my car. He seemed to be in his early 40s and wore a dark suit that looked too hot for the Texas heat. He held his hands where I could see them. He flipped open a leather wallet, showing a badge that gleamed under the lights. I rolled my window down an inch. Emma Martinez. His voice was calm and professional. I am Agent Michael Carter with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. He then said, Your father sent me to meet you. I did not move. Anyone could buy a fake badge online. He thought you might be suspicious, Carter said, unfazed by my hesitation. He told me that when you were 8 years old, you convinced him to adopt a three-legged dog from the shelter. You named her Lucky. She lived for another 6 years. My breath caught in my throat. Only my parents and I knew that story. We had no pictures of her. This was long before social media. I was 14 when she died, and I sobbed for a week straight. My legs felt weak as I stepped out of the car. How is he? I asked, my voice a whisper. He is alive, Emma, and he is waiting for you, Carter replied. He motioned toward the back of the facility. Unit 20 is this way. I have had this unit under surveillance since your father told me about the key. No one has been here. Are you certain about that? As certain as I can be. He started walking and I stayed right behind him. We will know for sure once we get you inside and scan for any tracking or listening bugs. I stopped dead in my tracks. Tracking bugs? Carter's expression was grim. Your father can explain everything, but Emma, you must understand, David's associates are extremely capable. If they wanted to watch you, they have the technology to do it. My hand flew to my shoulder. It landed on the spot where I got a vitamin injection 2 years ago. David had insisted on it. He said I seemed run down, that B12 would boost my energy. Could that have been it? Let us go, Carter said softly. Your father has waited 20 years for this talk. We should not keep him waiting any longer. We walked past long rows of orange garage doors marked with black numbers. The place was well lit but strangely quiet. The only sound was our footsteps on the asphalt. Security cameras on buildings and poles turned to watch us as we moved. Unit 20 was at the far back, shielded from the main road by a larger structure. It was a smart place to hide, I realized. The unit was totally invisible from the gate. I pulled out the key Vincent had given me. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Just take a deep breath, Carter advised. I slid the key into the padlock. It turned smoothly and the lock clicked open. I lifted the heavy metal door. Inside was not a storage unit. One wall was covered in monitors displaying security feeds from here and from streets I did not recognize. Maps of Austin were pinned to another wall, marked with colored tacks. A small bed and a refrigerator were in one corner. Stacks of file boxes were piled high. And in the center of it all, a man stood up from a plain metal chair. It was my father, Richard Martinez. He was 64 years old. He was the man whose funeral I had just left this afternoon, and he was standing right here. My legs gave out. I had to grip the door to keep from falling. All I could focus on was his face. He looked older, more worn out, but it was him. Emma, he said, his voice heavy with emotion. I could not form a word. I could not even breathe. My mind refused to accept what I was seeing. He took a slow step closer with his hands raised, like he was trying to calm a wild animal. I know this is a lot to take in. You are dead, I finally managed to say. I was at the funeral parlor. I touched your forehead. That was not me. The shame on his face was painful to see. It was a silicone model. The Federal Bureau of Investigation creates them for witness protection. It was made to my exact height and weight, with a face that was a perfect copy of mine. Someone must have paid the funeral director a fortune. They were instructed to keep the casket mostly shut and the lighting dim. I had to ask, paid by who? Carter spoke from behind me. The Federal Bureau of Investigation. He explained, it was all to protect your father. This is how we ensure witnesses remain safe when their lives are in grave danger. I just shook my head trying to process it. The entire situation was unbelievable. People do not fake their own funerals. You do not just find a spare body for a casket. Federal agents do not organize fake memorial services, but apparently they did. My dad pointed to a chair. Please have a seat. I have to tell you things that will be hard to accept, things I should have told you many years ago. My voice finally came back. Mom, where is she? I have been calling her phone, but she is not picking up. The look of guilt on my dad's face morphed into pure agony. That is what I need to show you. He faced the screens and played a video recorded only a few hours ago. It was the parking lot outside my parents' home. A black sport utility vehicle sat waiting there. Two men stepped out. My mother was walking from her car after the service. One man pressed a cloth over her mouth. She went unconscious and they shoved her into their truck. The time on the video showed 4:17 in the afternoon. That was 3 hours and 43 minutes ago. No, I breathed. No, please no. My father's voice was sharp with pain. They took her to draw me out. They must know the funeral was a fake. They know that I am still alive. And they know I would do anything for you and for your mother. I was completely still, my eyes fixed on that screen. I saw them put my mother's unconscious body into that dark van. Who? My voice was just a faint sound. Who did this? My father's face looked like it was carved from stone. That is a very long story. It started 20 years ago when I worked as a detective for the Austin police. I made a decision that resulted in the death of a very powerful man's son. Carter moved a little closer. Emma, I know this is a shock, but we have almost no time to get your mother back. Your father has been helping us for months. We do have a plan, but you have to understand who we are facing. I looked at my dad. at the face that had hidden this secret for 2 decades. Tell me everything, I demanded. He nodded his head slowly and heavily. It all begins with a man named Marcus Vulov, and I am so sorry to say, it is going to end with your husband. I sat in that small room with my dad as 15 years of buried secrets came out. Carter stayed by the screens with his arms crossed, watching us. Dad leaned in, resting his elbows on his knees. He squeezed his hands together so hard that his knuckles turned white. The year was 2009, he said. I was a detective with Austin's organized crime unit. We spent 3 years building a case against the Volkov family for laundering money. They were washing millions of dollars through real businesses like car washes, restaurants, and even storage places just like this one. His gaze moved around the concrete room. I had to wonder if he picked this place on purpose, if it resembled one Marcus Vulov had owned. Marcus Vulov was the head of the whole operation, Dad continued. Back then, he was 60 years old. He was a cold and brilliant man who had served in the Soviet military. He always protected himself with layers of people between him and any of his crimes. We could never reach him directly, I said in a low voice. So you went after his son instead. My father's jaw tightened. We went after his entire network. Alexander Volkov, Marcus's older son, was only 19. He was managing one of the fake businesses, a car dealership. We had solid proof he was approving fake sales to wash the money. We executed the search warrant on a Friday morning, May 15th, 2009. My dad's voice became cold and distant, like an officer giving a formal report. There were 6 of us on that team. I was the lead detective. We announced who we were and went in through the main office. He paused for a moment and swallowed with difficulty. Alexander was hiding in a back room. He had a 9mm Glock. The instant we opened the door, he started shooting. He fired 3 shots. One of the bullets hit my partner in his shoulder. So you returned fire? I said. Just one time, my dad's voice broke, straight to the center of his chest. He was dead before the ambulance arrived. The only sound in the room was the low hum from the monitors. Carter spoke from across the room. The shooting was ruled as justified. Internal Affairs conducted a 6-week-long investigation. Every single witness confirmed that Alexander shot his weapon first. Your father was only protecting his partner. But Marcus never believed that story, I said. My dad's face contorted with regret. Marcus Vulov had lost his eldest son. I can understand that feeling. I have a daughter. I know what losing a child can do to a person. He wanted to get even. Not immediately, my dad said. And that's what made him so much more dangerous. He stood up and started pacing in the small room. After Alexander died, Marcus just vanished. He took his whole criminal operation underground. His younger son, David, was 21 then, a student at the university. From everything we could tell, he was a good kid who had nothing to do with the family business. My stomach tightened into a painful knot. David was a business major, a junior in college. Dad took a file from a box and handed it to me. It was a university identification photo. A younger David with his hair longer looked back at me. It was definitely him. 3 months after his brother died, David disappeared too, Dad said. He dropped out of college and cut off contact with everyone he knew. We just figured he went to join his father in hiding. I could not take my eyes off the photo. That was the man I had married, just 21 years old, mourning his brother, and about to be turned into a tool of revenge for the next 10 years. Where did he go? I asked. Carter was the one who answered, Eastern Europe. We've managed to put some of the story together. He was in Moscow, Prague, and Budapest. Marcus had old contacts from his days in the Soviet army. We believe he was training David, not just in fighting, but in psychological tactics, how to create a new person, how to slide into someone's life, and how to gain their absolute and complete trust. For 12 years, I whispered. That is right, for 12 years, Dad said. Then 5 years ago, you walked into that coffee shop over on West 6th Street. The memory hit me like a punch. The server had mixed up my order with another person's latte. David was sitting close by and saw the mistake. He offered to switch drinks since my latte was actually the one he had wanted. We shared a laugh about it and talked for 20 minutes. Then he asked me for my number. At the time, it seemed like it was destiny. That was not an accident, I said, as the awful truth began to sink in. Nothing about your life with David was an accident, my dad said, his voice full of pain. When you both began dating, I ran a background check on him. David Miller, born in Austin, a real estate agent for commercial properties with great credit and no police record. It all appeared to be perfect, but it was all a lie. The identity he built for himself was perfect. A birth certificate, a social security number, a complete work history. They were all real, correctly filed documents, but every single one of them was a fake. Someone with a great deal of power had constructed an entire false life for him. When did you figure it out? I asked. I started having doubts about 3 years ago, just before your wedding. Some of the stories he told just did not make sense. The childhood home David described was torn down decades before he was born. His old elementary school did not have any record of him, but I had nothing concrete, and you seemed so incredibly happy. My dad's voice started to tremble. I kept telling myself that I was just being a worried father, that every little thing that seems out of place is not always part of a huge plot. But you did not stop looking. I hired some private investigators. They discovered even more strange things and impossible details in David's past, but we could not link him to the Vulov family. Carter's team was the one who finally put it all together 8 months ago. Carter stepped up to explain. We had been following Marcus Vulov's money for a long time. One of our agents found payments going to a document forger in San Antonio. After we applied a little pressure, the forger gave us a name, David Miller. From that point, we found security footage and used facial recognition software to match it to old photos of David Volkov. But we made a terrible mistake, Carter admitted, his jaw tight. We put all of our focus on David, watching every move he made, listening to his phone calls, and tracking his daily life. We were sure that if Marcus was going to act, it would be through David. We never thought that Marcus had a second crew, his own private soldiers. David does not even know that they are real. They are old friends from his Soviet days who answer only to Marcus. My dad's face was filled with guilt. That is how they were able to grab Linda. The men who kidnapped her have no connection to David. They were Marcus's private team and they operated completely around David. By the time our surveillance team noticed the black sport utility vehicle, your mother was gone. It was a 98% match, Dad said. David Miller and David Volkov are the very same man. My head started to spin all over again. I thought I was over the first wave of shock, but seeing this new information, this hard proof, made everything feel real in a way the letter never did. You knew about this for 8 months and you never told me. My father got on his knees, forcing me to look straight into his eyes. We did not know what his mission was, he said. Was he supposed to kill you, abduct you, or just ruin your life from the inside? We had no clue. If we arrested him, Marcus would have sent another person, a total stranger that we would not be able to identify. So you did nothing but watch, I said, my voice filled with a feeling of betrayal. You let me sleep right next to that man every single night. We had agents watching your house 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Carter cut in. We listened to the phones and watched every move David made. If he had tried anything dangerous, we were ready to step in. But he never did, my dad said in a quiet voice. For 8 months, David acted like the perfect husband. He went to his job, he came back home, and he had dinner with you. That is the part that worried me the most. Why? Because Marcus Vulov is an extremely patient man. He spent 12 years grooming David for just this moment. The last part of his plan would not be rushed. My father's hands trembled. He wants me to feel his pain. He wants me to see my own daughter ruined by her husband, carrying the baby of a man who plans to. Dad could not say the rest. I shot up from my seat, knocking the chair over. My baby? How could David possibly know I am pregnant? My father and Carter shared a grim expression. We believe your home has listening devices, Carter finally said. They could be listening, watching, or even tracking you. We will know more after we have checked the entire house. My hand drifted to my shoulder, right where I got that injection. Marcus chose to destroy my daughter from within, my dad said, his voice cracking. And he used my son-in-law to do it. Carter then showed me files covering 5 years of my life in stark detail. A monitor showed countless folders, each labeled with a year. The folders contained pictures, times, and places. My entire life with David was displayed like evidence. This is what we found in the last 8 months, Carter said while scrolling. Most of it came from observing David, but the older files are from Vulov's personal collection. Marcus kept records of everything, I said, feeling a chilling numbness. He needed evidence. He wanted my father to witness my downfall step by step. Carter spoke with a calm professionalism, but I could feel his rage simmering underneath. This was more than just causing you pain, Emma. This was about total humiliation. It was about making Richard watch his own daughter fall for his greatest rival. The first photo was from a cafe on West 6th Street. It showed David and me sharing a laugh after our drinks were mixed up. The file was dated 5 years, 2 months, and 6 days in the past. That was no coincidence, Carter stated. The barista was given $500 to swap your orders. David picked that exact spot because Marcus had his people watch you for 6 weeks. They knew your exact schedule down to that coffee shop every Tuesday. The thought made my stomach turn. They followed me for 6 weeks. The entire meeting was a setup designed to seem random. Carter clicked to a new picture taken inside a bookstore. It was David and me. our hands meeting as we both grabbed the same novel. I cannot even remember its name now. 2 weeks after that, they planted that book on the shelf. David had a copy at home he had never touched. Then came a picture from a restaurant. David was on one knee. I was weeping with happiness as he held up a small box with a ring. The proposal, I whispered. A proposal bought and paid for by Marcus Vulov. The ring was worth $14,000 and every cent was tainted. Every beautiful memory was now destroyed. It was all part of a 15-year plan for vengeance. Your home has had listening devices for about 2 years, Carter went on. We believe they were installed during a weekend you spent with your parents. David said he had to work and stayed home. A specialized crew entered and placed the bugs. They put them in your bedroom, the main living area, and the office. We were unaware of them then, Carter clarified. We had not started watching David yet. We had no idea who he was. Our surveillance began 8 months ago, and we focused on his movements and his calls. The devices in your house were dormant most of the time. They were set to activate only when they detected specific words. Their signal was too weak for our equipment to detect until the damage was done. They have been hearing everything, I said, my voice empty. For 2 whole years. Only sometimes, he corrected. The devices turn on for trigger words. Things like your dad's name, Federal Bureau of Investigation, police, or the word testify. It would record for 60 seconds and then send the audio file over a secure channel. That is how David found out about the baby. I remembered taking the test in our bathroom and whispering the word positive. The bug caught it. The wedding, my dad said softly. He had been quiet, letting Carter present the evidence. Bring up the wedding photos. Carter pulled up a picture from 3 years ago. I was in my gown, smiling, surrounded by everyone we loved. 12 guests in this picture work for Marcus Volkov, Carter stated, highlighting their faces in red. I thought they were David's friends from college, his work colleagues, and his faraway relatives. In reality, they were criminals, money launderers, and one was even a suspected killer. I shared dances with them, I embraced them, I mailed them thank you cards. But this is the most disturbing part, Carter said, displaying a medical record. The file was from a clinic I did not recognize, but my name was on it. It was dated 2 years and 1 month ago. I remembered a vitamin B12 shot. My hand shot to my left shoulder. David suggested it because I was feeling worn out, saying it would give me more energy. I remember David hurrying me to that clinic. The thought of it makes me shiver. The nurse barely glanced my way. It was a single fast shot, and we left in under 10 minutes. Carter told me the clinic was a fake, owned by a company that was a front for Vulov. The nurse who gave me the shot received $20,000 for his work. Carter pulled out a small device. I need to scan you to confirm my suspicion about that injection. I understood immediately. I rose, removed my jacket, and lowered my shirt collar to reveal my left shoulder. The mark from the needle had vanished completely, so the memory faded. Carter slid the scanner over my shoulder. Silence at first, then a sharp, steady beep started. His face grew grim. I have got it. What is that? I asked. He held up the screen. A small glowing dot, no bigger than a grain of rice, was visible under my skin. It was an inch deep, exactly where the needle went in. It is a biological tracker, Carter said. Military-grade GPS. It can pinpoint your location within 3 feet and also broadcast sound. The ceramic shell means it is invisible to metal detectors. It is powered by your own body heat, so it functions as long as you live. The floor seemed to tilt beneath me. I gripped the table just to keep my balance. They put a tracking device inside my body. 2 years ago, my dad whispered, his voice full of agony. For 2 whole years, they have known where you were and who you were with. A wave of nausea hit me. I just made it to a wastebasket before I threw up. My body seemed to be expelling the awful reality. I think my father was holding my hair. Someone else gave me some water. I cleaned my mouth out. Every intimate moment, every shower, every doctor visit, every private call to a friend. They had access to all of it. I was a human listening device for 2 years. We can remove it, Carter offered. I know a reliable surgeon 15 minutes from here. It is a quick 5-minute operation with a local. I straightened up and cleaned my face. Not right now. Both of them just looked at me. If we take it out, they will realize we are onto them, I explained. My training as a lawyer was kicking in. David believes I am visiting my mother. If this tracker stops working, Marcus will figure out I am with you. Show me everything you have, I told Carter, interrupting my father. I need to review every document, listen to every recording, and see every photo. To beat this man, I have to understand who my husband truly is. You are not going to defeat anyone, my dad said, his tone leaving no room for argument. You are going to a secure location while Carter's team handles this. No, my voice was steadier than I felt inside. Marcus already took 5 years from me. He implanted a bug in my body. He is holding my mother hostage. I looked straight into my father's eyes. I will not run. I will fight back. The light from the monitors cast a glow on 5 years of deceit. I want to see it all, I repeated. There was a long silence before Carter gave a slight nod and opened a new file. Just then, my phone rang, and everyone in the room went still. It was my mother. The phone was on the table, where I had left it while Carter was showing me financial records. For 45 minutes, we had been digging into David's hidden life. The phone's vibration on the metal table made us all jump. My mom's picture from last Christmas lit up the display. She was beaming next to the Christmas tree we put up together. Do not answer that, my dad said immediately, but Carter held up his hand, silencing him. Wait, this might be important. He connected a wire from my phone to his laptop. Emma, pick it up, put it on speaker, but let me route the call through my equipment first. My hand trembled as I reached for the phone. It was a video chat. I answered and aimed the camera so Carter could watch. My mom's happy expression appeared on the screen. The smile was the first sign something was terribly wrong. My mom had just come from my father's funeral. She was an absolute wreck. My aunt had to physically hold her up, so there was no reason for her to be beaming at me. Emma, dear, her voice was strangely pleasant. Oh, thank goodness, I have been trying so hard to reach you. Mom, I said, forcing my own voice to remain steady. Where are you? Is everything okay? I am perfectly all right, honey. I am staying at Margaret's house. She meant our neighbor from 3 doors down. I just could not face being in that house alone tonight, so Margaret insisted I stay with her. Her smile widened. But David keeps calling. He is so worried. He told me you vanished from the cemetery without telling a soul where you were headed. Carter typed furiously, his program analyzing the live video. Why did you not answer your phone? I asked, searching her face. I tried calling you the second the service ended. Oh, you know me, sweetie. My phone battery died. I am awful at remembering to charge it. Margaret is letting me use her phone. She inched a little closer to the camera. Emma, please just go home. David loves you more than anything. Whatever is bothering you, whatever argument you had, please just go home and work it out with him. We did not have a fight, I told her very clearly. Well, he certainly thinks you are upset about something. He is at the house waiting for you right now. My mother's expression was pleading. Please go home, honey. Just go back to David. Everything will be okay. David. She did not say your husband or tease me by saying that man of yours. She just used his first name. In 5 years, she had never once called him just David. An alarm appeared on Carter's screen, but I was already setting a trap of my own. Mom, I asked in a calm tone, do you remember what we had for breakfast yesterday before the service? There was a tiny pause. It was less than a second, but I felt it. Of course, dear, we enjoyed those amazing pancakes you made. A cold feeling washed over my entire body. We had not shared breakfast yesterday. I was at my house, too overwhelmed with sorrow to even consider eating. My mom was at her place with my father's sister. We absolutely did not eat pancakes. Mom, what was I wearing? I questioned her. Another brief hesitation. Your black dress, my dear, the one with the pearl buttons. I wore a suit. It was navy blue. It had no pearls. At that moment, a red box outlined my mom's face on Carter's computer. Next to her picture, a message appeared in red type. It said deepfake detected. Facial mapping shows 94% AI generation. Voice is synthesized. Small facial cues are absent. Recommendation: video is not real. I stared at the monitor, at my smiling mother telling me to go home to David. Emma, the fake mother said, tilting her head. Are you still with me? I think the connection is. I disconnected the call. The phone dropped from my hand and struck the table. I simply could not grip it any longer. My hands were shaking so hard I could not pick the phone up again. That was not her, I breathed. That was not my mother. Carter's voice was grave. No, he said, fingers flying over the keyboard as he launched new searches. That was a deep fake generated by artificial intelligence. They likely used photos and clips from your social media and family videos to create it. The technology is so sophisticated now that it can be interactive, responding to you live. The voice is almost perfect. My dad added, almost, but not flawless. They could not fake the little things. They did not know about your breakfast or the suit you wore. Carter then said, his eyes locked on the monitor. They were trying to make you return home. They wanted you inside your house with David, a place they can fully control. He abruptly stopped typing and went completely still. What is it? I asked. Carter looked up, his face pale in the glow of the monitors. Emma, we traced the call's origin to your home address. He turned the laptop so I could see it. A map showed a red pin placed right on my street, on my house. It came from inside your house. They are not just watching you, they are inside. The room started to feel unsteady around me again. The men who worked for Marcus Volkov were in my home, the house that David and I had shared for 2 years. The home where we cooked dinners, watched movies, fell in love, and spoke about starting a family. That was the same bathroom where I had taken a pregnancy test only 3 days earlier and whispered the word positive. Killers were in my home. They were using a digital puppet of my mother to lead me into an ambush. I had to ask, how many of them are there? Carter displayed a different screen. Thermal imaging showed at least 3 individuals inside the house. He said there could be others. My father's voice was dark. 3 armed men are waiting for you, Emma. I imagined the whole scene. I would walk through the door calling for David, believing I was safe. Would they shoot me immediately, or would David act normally at first just to deceive me? How did Marcus plan for me to die? Carter started packing his things. We have to go now, he insisted. They are in your house, but you are not doing what they want. They will figure out you are suspicious. They might alter the plan, or, I completed his sentence, they could come find me here. Carter shot a look at my dad. This place is protected, but we cannot take that chance. Richard grabbed an emergency bag. Emma, a federal safe house is the only choice. But I just kept staring at my phone. My mother's stolen face had been on that screen just moments ago. They took her voice, her smile, all of it. They twisted her into bait, and the real Linda Martinez was still in their hands. No, I said, my voice steady. The 2 men stopped what they were doing and looked at me. I am not running. My legs were trembling, but I forced myself to stand up straight. They are in my home. They have my mother, and I am certain David is responsible for all of this. I looked directly into Carter's eyes. You said there was a way to get my mother back. I want to hear it right now. My voice sounded colder than I ever knew it could. They tried to murder me using my own mother's face. Tell me the plan. After a few beats of silence, Carter slowly nodded. All right, he said, but you are not going to like it. My dad showed me a photograph that made things even more complex. Before we get to that, he said quietly, you need to know about David. You need to know who he was before Marcus shaped him into this. An image took over the screen. It was a smiling young man, maybe 19 years old. He had dark hair, a strong jaw, and eyes I recognized in an instant. I had seen those same eyes across the dinner table 1,000 times. This is Alexander Volkov. He was David's older brother. He looks just like him, I whispered. The same eyes, my dad said. The same smile, too, when David decides to smile. Alexander was the oldest son. He was Marcus's pride and joy. Carter put a second photo on the screen. It showed Alexander in a Texas Longhorns shirt at a football game. He looked so happy, so completely normal. He was a business student, Dad said. His girlfriend's name was Sarah. He even volunteered at an animal shelter. My father's voice went hollow. I did not know any of those things when I shot him. I only knew he had a gun and that he had just shot my partner. Tell me what happened, I urged. Not the official version. I want the real story. My dad was quiet for a long time. It was May 15th, 2009 at 7:30 in the morning. We went to a car dealership to serve a warrant. Our team had 6 officers. We announced that we were police and we went in. He stared at Alexander's picture. Alexander was in a rear office. When we came into the room, his gun was already pointed at us. I commanded him to drop it. He fired. Carter added, he fired 3 shots. One bullet hit Detective Marcus Webb in his shoulder. The other 2 missed. I fired back, just a single shot. My father's hands began to shake. It hit him in the center of his chest. He fell. We called for an ambulance and tried to stop the bleeding, but the bullet had severed his aorta. He died right there on the office floor. The only sound was the low hum of the computer fans. He was only 19 years old, Dad whispered. He was just a scared kid trying to seem tough for his father. If he had only dropped the gun, he would be 34 today. He might have his own family. My age, the same age as David. And Marcus blamed you for it, I said. Marcus blamed me for doing my job. The investigation lasted 6 weeks. Every witness there confirmed Alexander shot first. The official ruling was justifiable self-defense. But in Marcus's mind, my dad's voice cracked, I was a murderer. Carter stepped a little nearer. After Alexander died, David disappeared. He was a 21-year-old student, a nice kid. We figured he went into hiding with his father. We were mistaken. Marcus sent him to Europe. For 12 years, I said, remembering what they had told me. 12 years of brutal conditioning, Carter confirmed. Our contacts helped us figure out what went on. He was in Moscow, Prague, Budapest. Marcus reached out to his old friends from the Soviet army. We believe they reprogrammed David. It was more than just combat training, it was mental. They taught him how to live a fake life, how to get close to a person and earn their trust. Yes, they made him into a human weapon, Dad said softly. The terrible reality of the situation sunk in. David was just 21, and in mourning when his father began molding him into a tool for vengeance. Over 12 years, a young student was transformed into a killer to settle an old score. But look at this, Carter said, opening another document. We have been monitoring David for the past 6 months, and Emma, he has had no fewer than 3 perfect chances to end your life. Moments where you were totally exposed. My stomach tightened. 3 chances. 4 weeks ago, you were jogging alone in Zilka Park at 6 o'clock in the morning. David knew your every move. He could have ambushed you on some empty road. It would have passed for a simple mugging. Carter slid another file across the table. 2 months ago, your car's brake line was leaking fluid. We checked the security tapes from the repair shop. David was there the night before you brought the car in. He could have cut the line completely, but he only nicked it enough for you to find the problem. And 3 months ago, my dad said, his voice tight, you had that terrible flu. David nursed you back to health. He brought you soup and medicine. Carter's team tested the medicine later. It was harmless. That was the perfect time to poison you. I just stared at them, my thoughts spinning. He was ordered to take my life, but he never did. 3 different times, Carter confirmed. And who knows how many others we missed. David has been by your side for 5 years and your husband for 3. He had all the chances in the world, but he never took a single one. We have to wonder why. We are not entirely sure, Carter conceded, but we have a strong theory. He queued up an audio file. This was recorded 3 years ago from a listening device we had placed. It is a conversation between Marcus and David. He hit play. The cold, heavy accent of Marcus filled the tense room. You have been with her for 2 years. When are you going to finish the job? There was a brief silence. Then I heard David's voice, not as deep as now, but it was him. Soon. I just need more time. More time? Marcus's tone was sharp like broken glass. I gave you 12 years to get ready. I shaped you into the man you are. Is this how you thank me, by dragging your feet? She is not the woman you described to me. She is different. She is Richard Martinez's daughter. That is the only thing that matters. You will make him watch as she dies, just like I was forced to watch Alexander die. You will do it piece by piece. You will take away everything she holds dear, and then you will end her life as he is made to watch. After a heavy pause, Marcus spoke one last time. Do this for me, or you are no longer my son. The recording ended. The air in the room felt thick and hard to breathe. The casual cruelty in Marcus's voice was sickening. To him, I was not a human being. I was just a piece in his sick game of revenge. And David sounded so lost, so completely torn. That phone call was 3 years ago, my dad said softly. That was right about when David proposed to you. He was buying time, I whispered. For 3 years, he has been defying his own father. It points to one of two things, Carter said. Either David is planning something much more complex, or, I said, finishing his sentence, he actually fell in love with me. That thought gave me no comfort at all. It made everything a million times worse. Because even if David loved me, our entire life was founded on a horrible lie. He deceived me. He married me as part of a mission for vengeance. And now my mother was in danger. We were running for our lives, and David was stuck between his father's hatred and whatever he felt for me. My father saw the anguish on my face and said, That does not make him safe, Emma. It makes him more dangerous. A man torn between two worlds is unpredictable. I know, I told him. But when I saw the photo of Alexander, the young man with David's eyes, a wave of sadness washed over me. 2 brothers. One was gone at 19 because he panicked and pulled a trigger. The other was forged into a weapon of revenge, trapped between his heart and his orders. Markus Volkov destroyed both his sons, and now he was aiming for me. The storage unit was quickly turned into a command post as the Federal Bureau of Investigation team showed up. 6 agents in tactical gear filed in, carrying cases and setting up laptops. The small space was suddenly packed, the air buzzing with quiet tension and radio static. Carter projected a large image onto a screen. It was the thermal scan of a building. 2 bright orange shapes glowed against the blue. Your mother is here, he said, pointing to the larger figure. An old meat-packing factory on East Riverside. We have had it under surveillance for the past 2 hours. I stepped closer to look at the screen. She was inside with only one other person. No. Carter's expression turned grim. Look at the second heat signature more closely. The smaller orange shape was about half the size of the first. It was not an adult. I sucked in a sharp breath. That is a child. Yes. What child? My voice was harsher than I intended. Whose child is in there with my mother? Carter opened a file on another computer. He showed me a birth certificate from the Texas Department of State Health Services. The name on the paper was Liam Alexander Volkov, born March 12, 2016. The mother was listed as Sophia Grace Miller. The father was David Marcus Volkov. My world fell apart in that moment. David had a son, a 7-year-old boy I never knew existed. Sophia Miller died 3 years ago, Carter said quietly. It was a car accident. A single vehicle on a country road near San Antonio. She lost control and crashed into a ravine. The official report called it an accident. But we believe Marcus killed her, my dad added. Once David was engaged to you, Sophia became a problem he needed to solve. I could not look away from the birth certificate. Liam Alexander Volkov. His middle name was Alexander, for David's brother. A memory from just 2 weeks ago flooded my mind. David had brought a quiet 7-year-old boy to our house for dinner. This is Liam, David had said, ruffling the boy's hair. He is my friend Tom's son. You know Tom from the real estate office. He had a family emergency and asked if Liam could stay with us for a bit. I was a little surprised. David had only mentioned Tom a few times, and I had never met the man. Of course, I said, smiling at the shy little boy, we would be happy to. I made him some macaroni and cheese. We played a card game at the kitchen table. Liam was quiet, but he giggled when I groaned after having to draw 4 more cards. The boy called me Miss Emma and said thank you very politely after dinner, and then David took him home. Later that night, I asked my husband when I was finally going to meet this mysterious Tom. For just a second, I saw David's body tense up. He travels a lot, he said. He works with clients overseas. I promise you will meet him eventually. I let it go. Now I saw the truth. That was David's son, his own flesh and blood. I had served him dinner and played cards with him, and I had no clue who he really was. David brought his son to your home 2 weeks ago, Carter confirmed. We have it on our surveillance video. It was the only time in 5 years that David let his two separate lives overlap. We think he was trying. He paused. We think he wanted you to meet Liam. So if Marcus ever backed him into a corner, you would fight to protect that boy. Where has Liam been living? I asked. If Sophia has been gone for 3 years. He was with a nanny in a house that Marcus owns. He was kept away from others and taught at home. David visited him twice a week. The nanny reported him missing this morning right in the middle of your father's funeral. Marcus had kidnapped his own grandson, a little 7-year-old boy. Why? My voice was barely a whisper. Why would he do that to his own grandson? As leverage, Carter said, his face dark. To make sure that David follows his orders this time. Carter laid it all out. Marcus saw David was hesitating and could not be trusted to do the job. The threatening call, the men at my house, that was all Marcus, not David. Marcus was forcing this final showdown because he had lost faith in his son. He put another image on the screen, a blueprint of the meat plant. It was covered in red X marks. We believe Marcus gave David a final ultimatum. He has to kill me and Richard before sunrise at 6 o'clock in the morning. We have only 8 hours. If David fails, Marcus will kill Liam. Carter looked straight at me. David's father was threatening to murder his own 7-year-old grandchild if David did not murder his wife. The sheer evil of it was staggering. Marcus had ruined Alexander, manipulated David, killed Sophia, and now he was using a child as a weapon in his sick game. So what is the plan? I asked, trying to hold my voice steady. We make our move just before dawn, Carter said, at 4 in the morning. The Federal Bureau of Investigation team will go into the plant, get your mother and the boy out, and neutralize any threat. But we need to create a distraction first to pull Marcus's men away from them. A diversion, I repeated. Then my dad spoke up. I will do it. I will go to Marcus and tell him I surrender. I will offer myself in exchange for Linda. That will get his attention while your team moves into position. No, the word came out of me, solid and unbreakable. Everyone turned to look at me. If you go there, Dad, Marcus will kill you on the spot. Then he will hurt Mom just to be cruel. I pushed myself to my feet, fighting to keep my legs from shaking. It has to be me. Emma, that is crazy, my father protested. Marcus just wants to hurt you. I cut my father off. He wants you to see me perish. If I walk in there, he will keep me breathing just for you to see. It buys Carter's team the time they need. You are offering yourself as bait, Carter stated bluntly. I am saying I am the only option to get more time. I met my father's eyes. If you go, you will not last 30 seconds. If it is me, Marcus will create a spectacle. While he is busy with his show, the FBI can extract Mom and Liam. What happens after that? Dad asked, his voice thick with emotion. Marcus is still going to eliminate you. Then the FBI will take him down first, I replied, with more confidence than I felt. Carter and my father exchanged a long look. We have another problem, Carter finally admitted. It is about David. We have no idea where he is. He is not at the house with Marcus's men, nor at the plant with your mother. He has vanished, and his next move is a mystery. That is precisely why I must speak with him, I said. Before any of this goes further, I have to know if David is on our side, and there is just one method I can think of to be certain. I pulled out my phone, which had been off for some time, the very phone David had used to contact me. I turned to Carter. You can trace this call, correct? If I phone him, you can find his location. Carter said he could do it in less than 30 seconds. In that case, I am calling him. I looked at my dad, seeing the dread and powerlessness in his expression. I must find out if Marcus has completely broken David or if my husband is still there. And if he is broken, Dad asked in a low voice, then I will be going into that plant alone, I answered, but I will at least know the situation. I found David's contact in my phone. My thumb hovered over the green call icon. After 5 years of marriage, a life of deception and surveillance, I was finally going to talk to my husband. I touched the screen. My thumb was inches away when Carter's hand shot out to stop me. Wait, his tone was sharp. The tracking chip is still active. If you make that call, Marcus will hear every word through the audio. He will discover the entire plan. Oh, I looked down at my phone, then to my shoulder, where that horrible device had been for 2 years. We need to remove it, Carter insisted. Right now, before you make the call. An agent named Elena Torres stepped forward. She seemed to be in her middle 30s with dark hair pulled back, wearing blue medical gloves. She had arrived with the assault team, but I had not registered her presence until now. I serve as the team's field medic, she explained, her voice professional and calm. I can remove the device right here. The procedure is straightforward. 5 minutes, including a local anesthetic. You will barely feel it. I inquired how long the numbing would take. 2 minutes for the injection, then another 3 minutes for the numbness to set in. We simply did not have 5 minutes. I looked at Carter. How close are those vehicles you mentioned? His face grew grim. We do not have their precise coordinates. If Marcus sent a team from the same place, they might arrive in 15 to 20 minutes. There was no time to wait for the anesthetic. I took off my jacket and pulled my collar aside, exposing my left shoulder. Just get it out, Elena. That is not advisable, I interrupted Torres. Do it now. If you refuse, I will phone David with the tracker active, and Marcus will hear it all. Torres glanced at Carter, who gave a slight affirming nod. She set out sterile instruments on a metal tray. A scalpel, forceps, gauze, and antiseptic. Her fluid, practiced movements were more unnerving than the blade. Dad, I said, my voice firmer than I had ever known it. Come over here. Stand where you can see everything. He approached slowly, the color draining from his face. I need you to watch this, I told him. I want you to see the true consequence of your actions, not as an idea, but in reality. I want you to see what they did to me, I said, looking at him. Torres cleaned my shoulder with a cold, astringent liquid. The chemical scent stung my nose. This will be painful, she said softly. The chip is about an inch deep underneath the muscle. She explained she would work quickly, but the pain was unavoidable. Just finish it, I repeated. The small blade sliced into my flesh. I had thought I was prepared for it. I was deeply mistaken. The agony was instant and sharp, a profound violation that blurred my vision. This was not some mere accident. This was someone cutting me to remove something that never belonged inside me. My dad gasped, a sound like a stifled sob. I clenched my teeth and made myself speak. Keep watching. Torres worked with fast, confident motions. I felt a pulling, a strange shifting from deep within me. Warm blood trickled down my arm. Almost there, Torres murmured. Then I heard a soft click as her instrument made contact with the chip. I have it. She pulled it free and I finally looked. It resembled a grain of rice, smaller than my pinky nail. The casing was dark blue, now smeared with my blood. 2 years. That thing was inside my body for 2 years. Torres pressed a fresh cloth to the wound, applying firm pressure. It is not deep, and the removal was clean. No major vessels were nicked. You are going to need stitches, but this will suffice for now. She covered my shoulder with a clean bandage and handed my jacket back. Pain shot through my arm as I pulled it on. Carter held the tiny chip with forceps, examining it with a magnifier. He identified it as a military bio-tracker. It had a GPS accurate to 3 feet and could transmit short audio files. He indicated a small feature. It has voice-activated recording. Your name, FBI, and David Marcus were the trigger phrases. Each time you said one, it recorded for 60 seconds and sent the data over a secure line. I whispered, for 2 years. He nodded. That is how Marcus discovered your pregnancy. How he learned of our investigation, how he knew everything. The weight of his betrayal felt suffocating. Every private conversation, every tender moment, every time I spoke, David's name was recorded. Every talk with my dad about my FBI cases was sent and reviewed. Suddenly, alarms blared from Carter's laptop. An agent gestured at a screen displaying the building's entrance. We have a security breach. Three black sport utility vehicles with no license plates were speeding toward us. They are 2 minutes away. Carter's tone was grave. They are here. Marcus overheard everything we said. He knows we are with the FBI. He knows the plan, and he knows you are helping us, Emma. A team is on its way to intercept, he said. The room exploded into activity. Agents armed themselves, donned helmets, and moved to the door. Carter turned to me. We need to leave immediately. Use different cars and routes. Emma, you ride with me. I looked at him and said, no. I took the tracking chip from the tray. It was still slick with my own blood. I raised it so they could all see. I am keeping this. The room went still. Carter was the first to object. Emma, that is considered evidence. I corrected him. It is my leverage. Marcus thinks this is still inside me. He thinks he is tracking my every step and hearing my every word. This gives us an advantage. My father's voice shook. Or it is a death wish. Emma, please. You have suffered enough. I stopped him. This is my call, I stated, my hand tightening around the chip. Its surface was slippery, but my resolve was solid. It is not your choice or the FBI's. It is mine. I stared directly at Carter. I am going to that meat packing plant tonight. I will carry this with me so Marcus believes he is tracking and listening to me, my father objected. That is madness. If you go with or without the chip, Marcus will. I finished his thought. Marcus will celebrate. He will want a big production. He will want you to see it. Is that not what you told me? He wants to watch you in pain. I locked eyes with my dad, so we will give him exactly what he desires. I will go in alone, acting like I am being followed and pretending I have already been defeated. While he is savoring his victory, your FBI team can rescue Mom and Liam. Carter studied my face for a long moment. You realize that with a surprise assault and a full tactical unit, your survival odds are incredibly low. I am aware, he continued, and you are still willing to do this. I corrected him again. I am not willing. I am doing it. There is a world of difference. The alarms continued to shriek. The vehicles were now under a minute away. We need to go, an agent urged. Now, I raised my phone with David's name displayed on the screen. I looked at Carter. Call him, I commanded. Call him this instant, before that team arrives. I need to know if he intends to save me or to kill me. Carter produced a small listening device and nodded. I pressed the call icon. The phone rang once and then twice. On the third ring, David picked up. Emma. His voice was strained and frantic. Emma, where are you? I have been trying to reach you for hours. I know that you know. I know you are aware of the whole story. The room became silent as David's voice filled the air. Carter had patched the call to the team's headsets so everyone could listen. 6 federal agents, my father and I heard my husband's panicked breaths. Emma, he spoke my name like a prayer. Where are you? Please just tell me that you are safe. I made my voice as cold as ice. I am in a place you will never find me. And I know everything, David. I know all about Marcus. I know about Alexander. I know what they ordered you to do. There was a long pause on the other end before he replied. I know you do. I knew it the moment you left the cemetery without me. The tracker stopped sending me your conversations an hour ago. They found it and removed it, did they not? So he was listening? Or Marcus was making him listen? Tell me about Liam, I said. My voice was firm, but my heart was breaking. Your 7-year-old son, the boy you told me was your friend Tom's kid just 2 weeks ago. I heard David's sharp intake of breath. When he finally spoke, his voice was cracked with pain. I brought him to you because I wanted to save him. I was hoping that if you met him and loved him the way I knew you would fight to keep him safe when everything fell apart. I repeated his own words back to him. When everything fell apart? You mean when you finally worked up the nerve to kill me? No. I wanted to find a way to keep you both safe. His voice was breaking. Emma, I just could not do it. For 6 whole months, I have been trying to escape this mess. 6 months of lies, of putting him off, telling Marcus it was not time. He added, and he found out. He realized I was not with him anymore. I stated the obvious. It is because you started to love me. Yes, his reply was instant. God, yes, none of this was supposed to be real. My job was to get near you and make you trust me. Then I had to wait for Marcus to give the command. But sometime during that first year, it stopped being an act. When we got married, I was trapped. I was too scared to tell you what was happening. I heard a child crying on his end of the call. Is that Liam? I asked. Yes, David whispered. Marcus has him. He has Liam and your mother at the plant. He is forcing me to watch a video feed. There is a gun pointed at my son's head. A deep chill spread through me. Where are you? It does not matter. I am not there, but Marcus is making me see it all. His voice cracked again. Every time Liam calls for me, Marcus gave me an ultimatum. He said to kill you and your father by sunrise, or he will kill Liam. My own father will murder his grandson just to control me. I believed every word he said. I heard the fear and total helplessness in his voice. This was not the strong, charming man I had known for 5 years. This was someone completely broken, watching his own father threaten his child. I asked him carefully, David, you said you have been searching for an escape for 6 months. What changed? Why then? There was a long silence on the line. Then he answered, that is when your father's FBI agent got in touch with me. David explained that an agent Carter had approached him. He let out a sad, humorless laugh. Carter knew his whole story. David thought he was going to prison, but Carter gave him an offer. If David helped them catch Marcus and testify, he and Liam would enter witness protection. I looked at Carter, who just nodded. But you refused the deal, I said. I could not accept it, David replied. Taking the deal meant telling you everything. I would have to watch you look at me the way you are right now. I could not face that, so I tried to find another way. A way to save you and Liam without you hating me. There is not another way, I said, my voice empty. I see that now, he said, his voice defeated. There never was. Marcus has trapped me. I have to choose between you and my son. I heard Marcus yell in the background, David, are you still on that phone? David started talking quickly. I need to hang up. Emma, please stay away. Do not come home. Do not go near the plant. Marcus will kill you on sight. What if I want to? I challenged him. What if I trade myself for my mom and Liam? No, he screamed in desperation. Emma, you cannot. The East Riverside meatpacking plant, I stated, my voice firm and clear. I will arrive at 4 a.m. Tell Marcus I will be by myself. Tell him I want to make a deal. David pleaded, Emma, please, you have no idea what will happen. I know exactly what I am doing. I glanced at my dad and at Carter's team surrounding us. Tell him it is a trade, me for them. That is his real goal, right? To make my father watch me die. It is a trap, Emma, David said. Then I better have a good strategy, I replied. Marcus yelled again, David, get off the phone. David whispered, I have to go. I said it again. 4 a.m. Be there. Then he hung up. The room was completely quiet as everyone stared at me. Carter was the first to speak, his voice tense with frustration. You just made yourself the number one target. You told him when and where, and you said you would be there by yourself. You handed him everything he wants. Excellent, I said, putting the phone on the table. That was precisely my intention. This is not a game, he said sternly. I know it is not, I shot back. It is my trap. I am the distraction. While Marcus is focused on me, your people can rescue my mother and Liam. That was your strategy, was it not? You were just about to propose it. Carter's face was stern. He glanced at my dad, who seemed to have aged a decade. Another agent murmured, She is right. If he is focused on her, it gives us a better chance. She is not an advantage. My dad's voice trembled. She is my little girl. And Mom is your wife, I said. And Liam is just a 7-year-old boy. He should not be part of this. There are no good choices here, Dad. We have to pick the one that hurts the least. I faced Carter. So what is the strategy for 4 a.m.? He hesitated, then slowly nodded. Okay, he said, but you do everything I say. You try to play the hero and people will get killed. I get it. A map of the plant appeared on a screen. Here is how we will rescue your mother, he said, and with some luck we will get you out too. We had 4 hours. Carter's 6 agents in black gear stood around the screen. My father stood like a statue next to me. I was still in my bloody shirt from the funeral. A tiny microphone was taped to my chest, and I fought to ignore the fact that I was pregnant. East Riverside Meatpacking was built in 1987, Carter began. It is a single-story building with limited exits. Marcus picked it because it is isolated and easy to watch. The map showed a complex of loading areas, workrooms, and walk-in freezers. A big red X showed where my mom and Liam were located. Emma enters the building alone, Carter said. She will wear a microphone and a location tracker. Your job is to keep them busy for 20 minutes. That gives our snipers time to get on the roof while teams go in from the loading dock and south side. What if they search her for a bug? Someone asked. Carter's expression was grim. The device is ceramic. It is powered by body heat, so it is undetectable. If they ask you to remove your clothes, he told me directly, hit the emergency button. I nodded, a cold dread filling me. Sergeant Rodriguez, Carter said to the sniper, you will watch David Volov with a thermal scope from the roof. You know what to do. Rodriguez's voice was flat. If he aims a weapon at her, I will neutralize him. No, I blurted out. David will not harm me. Carter's expression softened for a second. Miss Martinez, David spent 5 years earning your confidence. He knows how you take your coffee. He knows what scares you the most. That does not make him an ally. It makes him the biggest threat in there. The truth of his words hit me hard. I had told David everything. He knew all my weaknesses. Emma, my dad pleaded, his voice cracking. Let me go instead. Marcus wants me. This is all because of me. I will trade myself for them. I met his gaze. No, Dad, Marcus does not want you to die. He wants you to watch me die. This is his last act of vengeance. He wants you to endure my death, just as he has endured Alexander's for 15 years. What he will not predict is me going in by myself. Carter gave a slow nod, understanding the reasoning. She is right. Emma changes the entire game. Marcus prepared for Richard. He did not prepare for his own daughter. My father's face crumbled as he retreated a step. Okay. Carter then pulled a small dark item from his vest. It was flat, circular, and about the size of a quarter. Here is your emergency signal. The audio feed is automatic, but if you face a direct threat or even glimpse a weapon, press this 2 times very quickly. That is the sign for us to move. We can breach the building in under 30 seconds. He put it into my palm, and I heard the firm click. Twice. Thermal scans show 2 people in the cooler, Carter continued, pointing to a screen. 2 thermal signatures, an adult and a child. It is Linda Martinez and Liam Volov. We have counted 4 hostiles with weapons, but more could be hidden. Marcus may not be there at all. He prefers to control these situations remotely. Are there explosives? I asked. Carter's silence was the only answer I needed. Oh my heavens, I whispered. We have a bomb specialist on standby. But Emma, if you see any device, any wiring, timers, or someone wearing a vest, you have to alert us immediately. If bombs are involved, do not resist them. I agreed with a nod, but my hands began to shake uncontrollably. Agent Torres, the team's medic, stepped toward me. Her face was kind, but her eyes were serious. Miss Martinez, there is something you need to know. You are approximately 6 weeks along in a pregnancy. Your blood pressure is high at 140/95. The strain of this situation, combined with the adrenaline, creates a serious risk of a miscarriage. A heavy silence fell over the command center. What are the chances? I whispered, my voice almost gone. Somewhere between 20 and 30%. The risk increases with any physical trauma, like a fall or if your pressure remains this high. I placed a hand on my belly. It was still flat, hiding a secret I had kept for 2 weeks. It was the child David seemed to know about before I said a word. Then I will just have to make sure everything is okay, I said quietly. Torres did not look convinced. My father's expression was one of pure terror. Carter checked the time on his wrist. Night falls at 0400 hours. Emma, you need to drive your own vehicle. Marcus will be looking for a group of cars. We will hang back a half-mile behind you with our headlights off. You will pull into the main parking area and use the south door. After you are inside, you get 20 minutes by yourself. After that, we go in. And what if David? I could not finish the thought. If David Volov aims a weapon in your direction, Sergeant Rodriguez has orders to take him down. I apologize, Miss Martinez, but I cannot gamble with your safety on the chance that a man Marcus Volkov trained for 12 years will choose love over survival. I wanted to argue with him. I wanted to have faith in the man who embraced me on our wedding night, who wished that perfect moment could last forever. But I knew right then that Carter was correct. The man I married could have been a total fabrication. I understand, I said. Carter handed me a lightweight vest made from Kevlar. Put this on beneath your jacket. It probably will not block a rifle round, but it might stop a pistol. I slipped it on. Its firm pressure was a weird source of comfort, hiding the microphone and shielding the new life I carried. Carter had one final instruction, and once you're inside, we go completely silent on the radios. No talk, no updates. We cannot allow Marcus to intercept our frequency. You will be alone until you give the signal. I completed his sentence. Or until the 20 minutes have passed. He confirmed. Or until the 20 minutes have passed. I turned to my father. His skin was ashen, and he looked like he had grown a decade older overnight. I love you, I told him. He wrapped his arms around me tightly, and I could feel him trembling. You have to come home, he breathed into my ear. Please, Emma, promise me you will come home. I stepped back, squared my shoulders, and looked Carter in the eye. Let's do this. The city was empty. 3 FBI cars trailed me from half a mile behind. I was unable to see them. Carter assured me they would be invisible. No headlights, no engine noise, but I could feel their presence. They felt like phantoms in my rearview mirror, like shades that matched my speed. Unit 1 to Principal, Carter's voice came through my small earpiece. We have eyes on you. We are holding our position. I did not reply. The microphone would pick up my voice, but I needed the silence. I had to clear my head. A soft green glow came from the Honda's dashboard. The time was 2:47 in the morning. 13 more minutes and I would be at the factory. That left 73 minutes until the 4 o'clock deadline from Marcus. I drove down the quiet Austin streets, passing the landmarks of our life together. South Congress, where David and I had our third date, the small cafe on East 6th, our supposed chance meeting 5 years back. The cafe was closed, but I could still see him in there. He was by the window with his laptop and he gave me a bashful smile when I accidentally spilled my coffee on his computer. I was mortified. He swore it was fine, that he was not working on anything special. That was not true. He was studying a file on me, learning my routines. He was rehearsing how to infect my life. I had no clue at the time. I just smiled, got him another coffee, and we spoke for 2 hours without stopping. Everything he said felt so right, from the words he chose to the angle of his head, even the pauses in our conversation. I was completely sure we were soulmates. I drove by the West Lynn bookstore. A year after we met, he proposed there. He got on one knee in the aisle between the poetry and fiction books, his voice trembling, the small box unsteady in his hands. Emma Martinez, you mean everything to me. Will you marry me? Tears streamed down my face, ruining my mascara. I covered my mouth and could only nod, too emotional to form words. The other customers clapped for us. A nice person even took our picture. I posted it online and wrote, I am the most fortunate woman alive. How did I miss all the signs? Our wedding felt like a fairy tale. It was in October under twinkling lights at a place in the hill country. My dad, wearing his formal uniform, gave me away while my mom cried happy tears in the first row. Seeing David at the altar in a crisp suit with that familiar shy smile and watery eyes, I knew he was my forever. I did not know about the three men at the back hiding their Volkov Enterprises tattoos under their shirts. I never questioned his small, quiet family or why they avoided all the photographs. That evening, he held me and murmured, I do not deserve you. I kissed him and replied, You are everything. He was telling the truth, but I did not understand his real meaning. I was at a stoplight on Riverside Drive. The crossing was deserted. I put a hand on my belly. At 6 weeks, you were just a small cluster of cells, but you were already a person, a part of me and a part of David. What will I do with you? I murmured to myself. How can I raise you in this world, knowing your history, knowing about your father? The light turned green, but I stayed put. I will give you a good life, I promised. My voice filled with feeling. I will always choose you, no matter how difficult or awful things become. This is not your fault. I finally pressed down on the accelerator. Only 2 weeks ago, David brought Liam over. He is the son of a friend, he mentioned offhandedly, while setting a bag of toys on our living room carpet. I'm just looking after him for a few days. I hope you do not mind. Liam was a quiet 7-year-old who saw everything. He had his dad's dark eyes, but a much kinder and softer face. I fixed him some macaroni and cheese, and we sat on the floor playing cards. He nodded off on the couch during a movie, so I covered him with a blanket and smoothed the hair from his forehead. David was watching from the kitchen entrance. When he caught my eye, his expression held a strong emotion I could not name. It looked like hope, but also like sorrow. You would make a wonderful mom, he said quietly. I just smiled and answered, maybe one day. He had to turn his head away. At that instant, it all made sense. He was watching me with his own child, a child whose existence was a secret, a child Marcus was using as a pawn. He was imagining another life, an honest life where we could be a real family free from all the deception, a life where his brother was not just a memory buried for 2 decades, but we were never going to have that life. I finally realized David was also a victim. He was just 21 when Alexander was killed. He was shattered and lost, and Marcus spent 12 years turning that grief into a weapon. Marcus trained him to despise my father, to enter my world, and to ruin me. But David made his own decisions. He took the assignment. He remained by my side. He married me. He held me. And he deceived me for 5 years. Even now, with his life and his son's life on the line, he had choices. He could have been honest with me. He could have left. He could have picked me. But he never did. Model Carter, I am about 10 minutes away, I said into the mic. His voice crackled back. We hear you. All units are set. Rodriguez is on the roof. You have the green light. I steered onto East Riverside, heading into the industrial zone. My world became a maze of chain link fences, gravel lots, and silent, dark warehouses. The meatpacking plant rose up ahead, a squat concrete box with one bare bulb glowing over its south door. The time was 3:42 in the morning, putting me 18 minutes ahead of schedule. That was intentional. Arriving first offered a sliver of control, a sense that I was leading this, not just another piece in Marcus's game. When you are completely powerless, you grasp at any tiny edge. My phone vibrated on the seat next to me. A text from David appeared. I am sorry for everything. A knot formed in my throat. I ignored the message. It buzzed again. A new message read, "This is not how I wanted things to be." I powered the phone down and slid it deep into my jacket. Two black sport utility vehicles were parked near the loading area. I drove into a spot maybe 30 yards away, killed the engine, and listened. The silence was absolute. I had a clear line of sight to the entry. It was a rusted steel door with no window, and it was cracked open just a bit. "Our subject is stationary," Carter's voice said in my ear. "We are holding our positions. A 20-minute timer starts the second you go inside." I released my seatbelt and my fingers found the alert button in my pocket. Two quick taps would summon the team in 30 seconds. I could feel the solid weight of the armored vest and the recorder tucked at my side. My thoughts were a storm of images. My mother bound to a chair, Liam with an explosive device strapped to his small frame. I pictured my father in the command post, watching on a monitor, unable to do anything. I thought of the new life growing inside me, too tiny to understand fear and too delicate for me to shield. "I am heading in," I said to my team. The sharp morning cold bit at my face as I got out of the car. Gravel crunched underneath my boots. Far off, a semi-truck rumbled along the highway. The south door swung open wider, revealing David in the doorway. He looked shattered, with hollow eyes and a patchy beard, his shoulders stooped by his terrible decisions. He stayed silent, simply raising a hand with the palm facing me, as if in surrender. I started walking toward him. As I got to the door, he murmured, "I am so sorry." I stared right into his eyes, the same ones I once adored, the ones that reminded me of Alexander in an old picture my dad owned. I gave him no reply. I moved past him and into the building's darkness. The door moaned shut behind me on its corroded hinges. A profound metallic chill filled the space, thick with the scent of dried blood and raw meat. Chains ending in sharp steel hooks hung down from above. The concrete ground was slippery with dark, damp patches. Carter spoke softly in my ear. "The target is confirmed inside. Your mother is 40 feet directly in front of you. We have identified 3 hostiles in elevated positions." The countdown had started. I had 20 minutes. I pressed against the wall, my hand hovering near the button in my pocket. I entered the main processing room. It was a frigid, quiet space filled with conveyor belts, metal tables, and massive saws. And then I saw her. My mother was sitting under a single hanging light. Plastic ties bound her hands and silver tape sealed her mouth. Her face was bruised, her lip was cut, but her eyes were alert. She spotted me and let out a frantic, muffled sound to warn me. I ran to her, dropped to my knees, and ripped the tape off her mouth. "Emma, it is a trap!" she yelled. At that moment, harsh floodlights flickered on, washing the plant in a bright clinical white. I spun around. David stood about 15 feet away, a handgun pointed at the floor. His face was a pained mask of regret. His eyes were bloodshot and his jaw was clenched. He was a man drowning in his own choices. "I am truly sorry," he said, his voice a choked whisper. I looked up to a steel catwalk circling the room about 30 feet high. 3 armed men in tactical gear were up there, their weapons aimed at David, not at me. I heard one speak into his radio. "We have our man. The woman is by herself and she is wearing a wire." David was not in charge. He was a prisoner too. One false step and they would shoot him. His hand trembled as he looked from the walkway to me, his eyes wide with fear. "Where is the boy?" I demanded. David's gaze shifted to a shadowy corner of the room. I followed his look and saw a small boy huddled behind a stack of wooden pallets. He was rocking back and forth, hugging his knees with his hands clamped over his ears. "Liam!" The boy was making a low, steady humming noise. It was the sound a terrified child makes to shut out the world. He had on a military-style backpack, the type built to conceal a bomb. "Oh no!" I whispered. "Emma!" my mother shouted. "Under my chair!" I glanced down and saw it. Fastened to the chair's legs was a gray block of explosive material. It had wires, a pressure sensor, and a black digital timer. "It is a bomb," my mother said, her voice shaking. "If I stand up, it detonates. The trigger is set for 5 pounds. I weigh 140. A wave of nausea washed over me. "Liam's backpack is the same," David said, his voice cracking. "It works on a pressure switch. If he takes it off—" He trailed off, unable to say the words. I forced myself to take a deep breath and think. I needed to find a way out. "Let them go," I said to David. "Take me. Marcus wants me, not them." David just shook his head, his expression hopeless. "He wants all of us. He wants your father to watch." A large television screen on the far wall flickered to life. The face of Marcus Vulov filled the screen. He was a man in his mid-50s with silver hair and an expensive suit. He sat in a wood paneled library holding a glass of whiskey, completely safe and miles away. His smile was cold and precise. Miss Martinez? His voice was dangerously smooth. I am so pleased you could make it. I glared at the camera. Release my mother and the boy. Your problem is with my father. Marcus chuckled softly. Do you really think you can make demands? You are not in a position of power here, Miss Martinez. He leaned toward the camera, his eyes narrowing. You are the price he has to pay. I kept my tone level. Are the bombs actually armed? The ones on my mother and Liam? Marcus's smile widened. Does it truly matter? You believe they are armed? David believes they are armed. Fear is a far more effective tool than C4, Miss Martinez. A bomb only ends a life. But the idea of a bomb, that creates despair. It starts a panic. It drives people to do things they never imagined. He took a slow sip from his glass. I am not a savage. I have no desire to hurt children with explosives. I want your father to see you die at the hands of the man you love. Explosives lack a personal touch. So what do I want? I want Richard Martinez to experience the same agony I felt 15 years ago. I want him to witness his own child's death. I want that image seared into his memory for the rest of his life. He needs to understand that true justice is not delivered by a badge or a court. It is paid for with blood. The official report called Alexander's death justified. Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper. Your father put a bullet in my 19-year-old son's chest. He watched him bleed out on the pavement, and they called it justified. He said the word like it was poison. There is no justification for murdering someone's child. My eyes went to Liam, still rocking and humming in the corner. Then why are you doing this to your own son? I challenged. Marcus's expression remained blank. David understands his obligations. He has known for 12 years. Family demands sacrifice. My son understands this. David flinched as if he had been struck. The weapon in his hand drooped. I cannot do this, he breathed. Marcus, I just cannot. Yes, you can, Marcus replied, his voice like ice. Or you can watch Liam die. The choice is yours. One of the gunmen on the catwalk leveled his rifle at Liam. A tiny red laser dot appeared on the boy's back, a perfect circle on his shirt. Liam continued to hum, completely unaware. No. David stepped forward, raising his pistol not toward me, but toward the gunmen. Instantly, all three rifles swiveled to aim at him. Red dots bloomed on his chest. David, don't! I shouted. He stood there frozen, his breathing ragged. Put the gun down, I said softly. Please, this is not how you save him. David's eyes locked with mine. His expression was the same as on our wedding night, and in it I saw everything, his love, his guilt, and a profound, crushing sorrow. I never wanted you to go through any of this, he said. I know, I answered. He let the gun fall to his side. Marcus leaned back, smiling. How touching, but we are running out of time. The deal is simple. David shoots you. Richard watches it on a private feed I provided him. Your mother and Liam walk free. He took another drink. If David refuses, I will detonate both charges. Everyone in this building will be gone. Richard will still watch it happen. The only question is whether you die from a bullet or in a fireball. That is not a choice, I said. No, Marcus agreed. It is justice. From behind me, my mother whispered, Emma, the button. But I couldn't press it. Not now. 30 seconds was an eternity with active bombs. I had to play for more time. What happens to David after? I asked Marcus. If David pulls the trigger, do you let him live? Marcus's grin just widened. Of course not. David will die too, but Liam will live. That is the deal. David's eyes shut tightly. I looked at our son, his hands clamped over his ears. He was only 7 and completely innocent. I saw my mother tied to a bomb. I thought of the baby I carried only 6 weeks along. A tiny life that deserved a chance. Fine, I managed to say. David's eyes shot open. Emma! Fine, I said again, my voice firmer as I faced the camera. But Liam and my mother have to leave first. After they are safe, David can shoot me. Marcus tilted his head, faking consideration. No, he replied. You do not make demands. You are the payment. Then he smirked. Before I reveal what happened next and whether David really shot me, do me a favor. If you're still with me, please type the word 20 in the comments. That number is very important. I should warn you, this story contains some very intense scenes. If that is not for you, now would be the time to step away. Still here? Okay, let us continue. I was trapped, finally confronting the man behind my nightmare. You are doing this to make my father suffer for Alexander's death? I asked, my voice trembling. I understand the pain. Marcus set his glass down and leaned in. He did not just kill him, he murdered him. Alexander was only 19. The official report called it self-defense. Reports, Marcus sneered. That was your father's story, written by his friends and signed by a man in his debt. Alexander fired one shot because he was terrified. Your father shot him 3 times and left him on the street. I glanced at David. He looked sick and the gun seemed to weigh him down. I am not defending what my father did, I said carefully, but turning David into a killer will just create more pain. Pain! Marcus let out a bitter laugh. You want to talk about pain? Let me tell you about it. I buried my son on his 20th birthday. I watched my wife slowly drink herself into the grave. David spent 3 years in a mental hospital after his brother died. Do not you talk to me about pain. Then please do not make Liam a victim too, I begged. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Liam understands sacrifice. He is a Vulov. He is a 7-year-old boy. He is old enough. His cold tone sent a shiver down my spine. I had to try something else. You are turning David into someone who takes a child, the very thing you hate. How is that justice? Because your father has to watch, Marcus said simply. He will live with it forever. Every day he will wake up knowing his daughter died for something he did 15 years ago. That is my justice. Behind me, my mom whispered, Emma, please do not. Marcus glanced at her, then back to me. A flicker of genuine surprise crossed his face. You never told her, he said to David. David's jaw was clenched, but he stayed silent. Told me what? I asked. A slow, cruel smile spread across Marcus's face. You are pregnant, about 6 weeks. David has been monitoring everything, your cycle, your symptoms, even your blood work. He got the results from your doctor. He paused. You are carrying my grandchild. I could not breathe. My mom made a strangled sound. Emma! This makes the entire thing even more perfect, Marcus continued. Your father loses his daughter and his grandchild. I will lose a grandchild, but I have already lost a son. I can handle that kind of pain. Your father cannot. I was speechless. My mind was blank. David looked completely broken. This is not what I wanted. I begged him to stop. You did nothing, Marcus snapped. You have stalled for 6 months, David. You had 3 chances to finish the job and you failed. In February, you messed up the brake line. It just turned on a light, the security system in May. You set off the second alarm. And the water in August, the dose was so low it was harmless. My mind was racing. 3 attempts, 3 failures. David had been trying to get rid of me for months, but he had failed on purpose. You are just not strong enough, Marcus said with disgust. You are weak, just like Alexander. David's hand tightened on the gun. So I will make this simple, Marcus went on. David raised the gun, pointed at her chest. You have 60 seconds. If you fail, I set off both bombs. Your son dies, her mother dies, Emma dies, no matter what. Nobody wins. Above us, the 3 guards aimed their rifles at David. 60 seconds, Marcus said again. Starting now. David raised the pistol. His hand was shaking as he pointed it at me. His eyes were filled with tears. I am so sorry, he whispered. Emma, I am so very sorry. I glared at Marcus on the screen. You are lying. You would never harm your own grandson? Marcus's cold smile stayed in place. I already lost one son. What is one grandson? You are bluffing, I said. This is a sick game. The bombs are not real. You are just using fear. There are no bombs. 40 seconds, Marcus announced calmly. David's gun was shaking violently. Marcus, please, is there really a bomb on Liam? Please, 30 seconds, just tell me. David screamed, the gun still on me, his voice breaking. Did you really put a bomb on my son? Marcus leaned back, swirling his drink. Yes, of course, I am not an amateur. If the police come, I trigger it. If you aim at anyone else, I trigger it. And if you do not shoot in, he glanced at his watch, 20 seconds, I trigger it. David's face went pale. I saw Liam in the corner, rocking and humming to himself. His hands were over his ears and he had no idea about the bomb. He was just 7. My hand found the emergency button in my pocket. If Marcus was truthful, pushing it would end us all. If he was lying, it was our only hope. I had 10 seconds to decide. David's finger moved to the trigger. I am sorry, he repeated, his voice hollow and dead. It was the sound of a man who had lost everything. 10 seconds, Marcus called out. My mother screamed, Emma, no! David's aim steadied, pointing right at my chest. 5. I locked eyes with David and saw the exact second he decided. 4. His finger squeezed the trigger. 3. I pressed the panic button 2 times. 2. David swung the gun away from me, aiming at the screen, at Marcus. 1. Then he fired. It all happened at once, but the moment seemed to stretch on forever. David fired the shot. I braced myself. The bullet ripped through the giant screen. Glass exploded in a flash of light. Marcus's face shattered into a million pieces. His voice was replaced by the sizzle of broken electronics and a burning smell. The three guards above turned toward David, raising their guns. "He is a traitor!" one yelled. I hit the panic button again, twice, with everything I had. The huge bay doors flew open with a deafening bang. Federal agents in black gear poured into the room. Carter's voice echoed, "Federal agents, drop your weapons now!" A window high above us broke. Sergeant Rodriguez was on the roof with his rifle. He fired two shots. Two guards on the walkway went down, their weapons clattering. The last guard aimed at the agents. A third shot from Rodriguez sent him over the edge. He hit the concrete 30 feet below with a sickening thud. Then I heard beeping. It was high-pitched and fast, from two separate places. It came from my mom's chair and Liam's backpack. "Bomb!" someone shouted. David instantly ran to Liam and tore the backpack off him. Liam yelped, covering his ears again. David opened the bag. Inside was a tube covered in wires. A red light blinked faster and faster. Beep, beep, beep. A bomb squad agent ran to them. He glanced inside and screamed, "Flashbang, get down!" But it was too late. David was just holding it, staring, and I saw the moment he understood the true cruelty of his father. It was a lie, not a bomb. It was a stun grenade, a weapon that stuns instead of kills. The device exploded in his hands. A blinding white light filled the room, and a deafening sound shook the entire building. A powerful shockwave hit us like a solid wall inside the warehouse. I shielded my face with my arm, but the light was so intense it burned through my closed eyelids. All sound vanished. It was replaced by a single high-pitched ringing. The noise was so piercing it felt like my eardrums would burst. I could not see, hear, or even think. As my vision slowly returned, I saw blurry shapes moving around. I saw David on his back, thrown 6 feet from where he stood. His hands were burned black, the skin peeling away as smoke rose from them. His eyes were open but vacant. His pupils were huge, and his mouth moved without making a sound. Liam was on the floor beside him. He was curled into a tight ball, screaming silently. I could not hear him, but I saw his mouth was stretched wide open and his small body trembled with fear. I think my mom was screaming as well. Her chair was tipping over. The plastic ties still bound her wrists together. The device under her seat was beeping even faster. A second device was about to detonate. The bomb technician shouted and ran toward her. Carter reached her first. He dropped to his knees, took a tool from his vest, and started cutting the ties. "Stay down, it is on a pressure switch." The unguarded side door was suddenly thrown open. Two men dressed in black uniforms rushed inside. It was Vulov's backup team. They raised their rifles and began to fire. The flashes from their muzzles lit the dark corner like strikes of lightning. Bullets ripped through the space all around us. They struck steel tables and concrete walls, sending sparks flying everywhere. An agent from the Federal Bureau of Investigation fell, clutching his leg. Another agent returned fire. Glass from the overhead lights shattered and rained down like glittering dust. Dad appeared in the doorway right behind the gunman. He should have been at Unit 20. He held his service pistol, and his face was a mask of pure rage. "Emma!" he yelled. One of the shooters spun around to face him. I did not hear the gunshot, but I saw my dad drop behind a metal table. Bullets shredded the steel where he had just been. Carter sliced through the last plastic tie. He grabbed my mom's arms and pulled her away from the chair. The device underneath exploded. It was another stun grenade. It unleashed another agonizing wave of light, sound, and pressure. The chair flew into the air, its metal legs twisted. Mom and Carter were thrown to the ground as smoking debris flew past them. Mom rolled over. She was coughing, her hands clamped over her ears, but she was alive. The gunfight became even more intense. The agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation took cover, while the backup gunmen advanced. Bullets were flying in every direction. Rodriguez fired again from the roof, and one of the shooters fell in the middle of a step. The second gunman turned his weapon on David. He was still on the floor, completely defenseless. His hands were burned too badly to even hold a weapon. The gunman raised his rifle, aiming it directly at David's head. I did not hesitate. I just began to run. My legs pumped as fast as they could, and blood pounded in my ears, which was still deaf. I slammed into David's shoulder with all my strength, knocking him out of the bullet's path. The bullet that was meant for his head tore through my upper left shoulder instead. The pain was a brilliant, white-hot flash. It was worse than any pain I had ever imagined. My knees buckled and I collapsed onto the hard concrete floor. Warm, sticky blood was already soaking through my shirt. Through a fog of pain, I saw Dad rise from behind the table and fire his gun 3 times. The second shooter dropped and his rifle clattered away. The entire factory fell silent. Or maybe I just could not hear anything at all. I lay on my back, staring up at the meat hooks on the ceiling. A dark pool of my blood was spreading beneath me. My shoulder felt like it was on fire. The pain shot down my arm and up into my neck. I could not move my left hand and I had no feeling in my fingers. David's face appeared above me. His burned hands reached for me, but he was unable to hold me. His face was covered in black soot and tears streamed down his cheeks. His mouth was forming words, but I could not understand what he was saying. I tried to speak, but my own voice sounded very far away. Why? I could see the word form on his lips. Why did you do that for me? Blood began to fill my throat. I coughed, and it had a metallic taste. Because, I managed to say, and each word was torture. This needed to end with someone. His face crumbled. He leaned down and rested his forehead against mine. I could feel his tears on my skin. Then my dad was there. He knelt beside me, applying firm pressure to my shoulder to stop the bleeding. I could not understand his words, but I saw the absolute terror in his eyes. Behind him, medics from the Federal Bureau of Investigation were rushing in. One began cutting away my shirt while another pressed gauze to the wound. My mom made her way to my side. Her bruised face came into my fading view. I could see her lips moving. "Stay with me, my dear. Just stay right here with me." I tried to nod, wanting to show her I would be okay, but my vision was shrinking, turning into a dark tunnel. The pain was dissolving into a cold and strange numbness. The last thing I saw before losing consciousness was little Liam. An agent was carrying the terrified boy away. He had his hands pressed hard over his ears, his mouth open in a scream that I could not hear, and David, with his injured hands, was still reaching out for me. The smell of antiseptic and a rhythmic beeping sound pulled me back to the world. I opened my eyes to a ceiling of white tiles under dim fluorescent lights. A tube was taped to my left arm, my right shoulder was wrapped in thick bandages, and a dull pain throbbed with every beat of my heart. I was in a hospital room. I turned my head slowly. My entire body felt sore. I saw my dad sleeping in a chair next to the bed. His head was resting on his chest, and he was still wearing his tactical vest over a blood soaked shirt. That tiny movement was enough to wake him. His eyes, red and swollen, shot open with alarm. "Emma!" he said, his voice trembling. He took my hand and squeezed it. "Thank God! You were unconscious for 2 hours. They said the surgery went well, but the baby," I whispered. My other hand drifted down toward my stomach. "Is my baby okay?" The door opened and a woman in a white coat walked in. She appeared to be in her late 40s, with dark hair pulled back and a stethoscope draped around her neck. Her name tag read Dr. Rachel Bennett, an obstetrician who specialized in trauma surgery. "Miss Martinez," she said, pulling a wheeled stool closer to the bed. "My name is Dr. Bennett. I am overseeing your care. How are you feeling right now?" "The baby," I repeated, my voice a little stronger. "Is the baby going to be all right?" Dr. Bennett's expression was calm but extremely serious. "The fetal heartbeat is strong and steady. That is the good news." I held my breath, preparing myself for what was coming next. "The bullet wound passed cleanly through. It entered your upper left shoulder and exited without hitting any vital organs. You have no damage to the bone, and no major arteries were hit. You are going to need physical therapy, but we expect you to make a full recovery." "But," I prompted, knowing there was something more she needed to tell me. Dr. Bennett held up a tablet displaying an ultrasound image. "The trauma, the extreme stress, and the physical shock have resulted in a subchorionic hematoma. It is a collection of blood that has formed between your uterine wall and the sac that is holding the baby." I stared at the blurry black and white image. I could see a tiny flicker in the middle, which was the heartbeat. Next to it was a dark, shadowy area. "What does that mean for them?" Dad asked in a low voice. "It means there is an increased risk of miscarriage over the next 2 to 3 weeks," Dr. Bennett explained. "Currently, Miss Martinez is about 6 to 7 weeks pregnant. She is in her first trimester, which is always a period of high risk. The hematoma might be absorbed by the body, or it could lead to bleeding and the loss of the pregnancy." The room began to feel unsteady. I gripped the side of the bed to hold on. "What can I do to help?" I asked. "You must be on complete bed rest for the next 14 days. We will also give you progesterone supplements to help support the pregnancy. No physical exertion and absolutely no stress." She paused and looked directly at me. "I understand that may be difficult given your recent experience, but your body needs this time to heal. These next 2 weeks are extremely critical." "Is my baby going to survive?" I whispered. Dr. Bennett's face softened with empathy. "I cannot make any guarantees, but I have seen women overcome much worse. You have to give your body a chance. Just concentrate on resting. We're going to watch you closely." I gave a nod as tears began to roll down my cheeks. A strange mix of relief and absolute terror washed over me. My dad gently squeezed my hand. We'll make sure you get all the rest you need. I'm staying right here with you. Your mother will be up as soon as she can leave. I asked, Mom is here in this hospital? Dad answered, she is just 2 floors below us. She has some bruised ribs and a slight concussion, but the doctors are sure she will be fine. Carter brought her in right after you arrived. As if on cue, Carter appeared in the doorway. He was still in his tactical gear and looked like he had not slept for days. He gave a small nod and said, Miss Martinez, I am very relieved to see you are awake. I asked, what happened after I blacked out? Carter stepped fully into the room, folding his arms across his chest. Agent Carter said, we've taken control of the plant. 3 of Volkov's men are dead, and we have 2 more in custody. Your mother and Liam were brought here to be evaluated. Child Protective Services has Liam now. A doctor found no signs of physical injury, but the boy is in a state of deep shock. He has not said a single word since the explosion. A heavy weight pressed down on my chest. What about David? I asked. Carter's expression became very serious. He is in federal custody, handcuffed to a bed 1 floor above us. He needed skin grafts for second-degree burns on his hands. He's facing a very long list of charges like conspiracy, aiding a kidnapping, attempted murder, and racketeering. I had to ask. And Marcus? Carter's voice was heavy with frustration as he said, he got away. He used a private jet from a small airport near Houston and landed in Monterrey, Mexico about 6 hours ago. Interpol issued a red notice and we've frozen $18 million of assets from Volkov Enterprises. We also arrested 40 people in his organization across 3 states. My voice was flat as I said, but he is still out there. Carter leaned against the wall and replied, for now, David's cooperation is going to be critical. He knows all the safe houses, every contact, and every financial detail. His testimony could bring down the whole operation. I shut my eyes. He wants to see me, does not he? Carter nodded slightly. He specifically asked for you. He wants you to be his lawyer. A dry, weary laugh escaped my lips. That is a major conflict of interest. I am one of his victims. I cannot possibly represent him. Carter said. He is aware of that, but he trusts you. And to be honest, Miss Martinez, your help, even if it is not official, could save lives. The faster we locate Marcus, the safer we all will be. I looked over at my dad, who was standing there with a clenched jaw. I whispered, I will talk to him, but only this one time and not as his lawyer. Dr. Bennett voiced his disapproval. Miss Martinez, I really must advise against this. I said firmly, 5 minutes, then I promise you I will get some sleep. About 20 minutes later, a nurse pushed my wheelchair to the hospital's secure wing. 2 federal agents were standing guard outside David's room. Inside, David was propped up with several pillows. His hands were covered in bandages all the way to his elbows. He had a clear oxygen tube in his nose, and one of his ankles was shackled to the bed frame. He looked up when I entered. His face was pale, his eyes seemed empty, and his lips were dry and cracked. He whispered, Emma. I wheeled my chair closer, being gentle with my hurt shoulder. I am not your lawyer, I cannot be. But I am going to give you some advice. I am only doing this for Liam, not for you. David nodded, finding it hard to swallow. I get it. A heavy silence filled the space between us. The question I had been holding back finally came out. Did you ever actually care about me? Tears began to fill David's eyes. It started out as an assignment. Marcus gave me a file on you and told me to become your perfect guy, but by our 3rd date, his voice broke. By our 3rd date, I was already falling for you. After that, I was just trying to find a way out. I reminded him, you had 5 years. I know. A single tear rolled down his cheek. I am not asking you to forgive me. I just needed you to know it was real. It might have started as a lie, but my feelings for you became the truth. I looked at his bandaged hands, thought of the new life inside me, and remembered pushing him out of the way of a bullet. I cannot be your lawyer, I repeated. It is a textbook conflict of interest. But I can help you build a defense. I will find a good attorney for you, and I will consult on plea deals. This is all for Liam's benefit. He deserves a father who at least tries to do the right thing, no matter how late it is. David closed his eyes and nodded weakly. I began to wheel myself to the door. Emma, he called out softly. I stopped and turned back to him. Thank you for saving my life. I did not respond. I just left the room. When I got back to my own room, Dr. Bennett was waiting with some paperwork. I'm referring you to Dr. Sarah Williams. She specializes in expectant mothers who have been through severe trauma. She will monitor you very closely for the next month. I was too worn out to object, so I just nodded. The door opened slowly again. My mom was standing there, leaning on a crutch. Her face was bruised, but her eyes were sharp and determined. Emma, sweetie, she said, her voice shaking a little, I need to tell you something about the day they took me. I looked at this incredible woman who had shielded me from a blast and faced Marcus Volkov's rage. I had a feeling her next words would change everything. What is it, Mom? She looked at Dad, then back at me. In a quiet whisper, she said, I already knew. My dad stepped out into the hall at my mom's request. She needed to speak with me alone. Mom carefully sat in the chair beside my bed. She rested her crutch against it, her bruised face showing both sorrow and resolve. What did you mean you already knew? I asked quietly. She took a shaky breath. About 8 months ago, an envelope appeared at our house. There was no stamp or return address, just my name written in large letters. I waited for her to continue. Inside was a file, my mom said, her voice barely audible. It had police reports, psychological evaluations, and crime scene photos. It was all about the night your father shot Alexander Vulov. A feeling of nausea swept over me. What did the file claim? It claimed that Richard murdered him in cold blood. Tears began to roll down my mom's cheeks. It said Alexander was unarmed and shot in the back. It insisted your father planted a gun on the body to claim self-defense. The report called the official story a lie that was covered up by other police and a corrupt prosecutor. I stared at her, finding it hard to process her words. And you believed it? She admitted with a pained voice. I did not know what to believe. There were pictures, Emma, photos of the scene I had never seen before. The way the body was positioned looked all wrong. A psychological report said your father had antisocial tendencies. It also mentioned he was disciplined for using excessive force 3 times before Alexander's death. Mom, I found a note inside. She stopped me, pulling a folded paper from her pocket with trembling hands. This one, she gave it to me. I gently unfolded it and read the typed words. Mrs. Martinez, your husband is a very dangerous man. He has been lying to you for 15 years. Now he is making your daughter his next victim. I need your help to keep her safe. Please call this number, a concerned father. A phone number was printed at the bottom. It was unsigned. I read aloud, a concerned father. A cold shiver went down my spine as I finally understood. Marcus, Mom nodded, wiping away a tear. I did not realize it was him then. I only knew I had to learn the truth if Richard was a danger to you. So you called the number? No, Mom said, shaking her head. I am not an idiot, Emma. I have been married to a cop for 30 years. I know how evidence should be handled. So I took the papers to a private investigator. I found one with no ties to the Austin Police Department or your father, and I paid him to help me. He did a full forensic analysis, examining the paper and ink, and he looked into the digital data from the scanned police files. My mom's voice became strong and clear. Every single document was a fake. They were well made, expensive forgeries, but none were authentic. The crime scene photos had been digitally altered. The psychological profile was fabricated using the stolen identity of a real doctor. The note itself was on paper made this year, not 15 years ago. A powerful wave of relief washed over me. So you knew all along that Dad was innocent. My mom corrected me, saying she knew Marcus Vulov was laying a trap, but I never understood his reasons until the very end. What do you mean? Her hands gripped her crutch and her knuckles turned white. The detective explained the fake documents had a single goal. They were created to make me doubt Richard, to make me afraid of him. He wanted to push me away from my husband and our child. She looked right at me, her eyes filled with pain. Emma, Marcus turned my love for you into a weapon against me. He knew that if I thought you were in danger, I would do anything, even turn on your father. But you never did, I said. I was trying to warn Richard, Mom said. At the funeral, I was going to pull him aside, show him the papers, and tell him everything. But when I got to the cemetery, her voice trembled. 2 men ambushed me in the parking garage. They used chloroform to knock me out. I woke up tied to a chair with plastic zip ties. I reached for her hand and squeezed it. I am so very sorry, Mom whispered. I should have gone to your father the moment I got that envelope. I should have trusted him. But I was scared and I needed to get proof first. Marcus used my fear against me. Mom, I said, making her look at me. You did trust Dad. You hired someone to prove the papers were fake. You tried to warn him. You did not betray him at all. I waited too long, she answered. And because I waited, you almost died. No. I gripped her hand tighter. Marcus is the only one to blame for what happened to me. You were protecting our family by searching for the truth. That is not betrayal, Mom. That is bravery. My mother began to cry as tears streamed down her cheeks. I was so scared. When I was trapped with that bomb, all I could think was, if I die, she will never know I was on her father's side. She will think I was helping Marcus. I never thought that, I told her, but a tiny part of me wondered. Marcus wanted our family to destroy itself, Mom said, drying her eyes. He wanted Richard to think I betrayed him. He wanted you to think I was part of it. He wanted me to be frozen with fear. He hoped we would fall apart on our own without him doing a thing. I thought about the 5 years David spent getting close to me. The constant watching, the lies, the slow poisoning of our trust, that is how he works, I said quietly. He does not just take lives, he makes people ruin each other. My mom nodded, and he almost succeeded. The door opened quietly. Dad stood there looking uncertainly from me to Mom. Richard! Mom started, her voice heavy with emotion. I have something to tell you. I know, Dad answered gently as he walked in. I was standing right outside. I am sorry, Linda. I had to hear it for myself. Mom looked heartbroken. I should have told you right away. Dad walked across the room in 3 long strides and pulled her into his arms. You did exactly what I would have done. You got the evidence before you made a move. That is not betrayal. It is just smart detective work. Mom sobbed on his shoulder. I watched them both. For 15 years, my parents lived with the threat of Marcus Vulov hanging over them. They were lied to, terrified, and nearly destroyed. In that moment, something shifted inside me. Marcus tried to turn us against each other, but he failed. I gestured to my dad. Both of you, get over here. They stood on either side of my bed. I took their hands, holding one in each of mine. From now on, I said firmly, this family tells the truth. No more secrets, no more delays. We face our problems together or we will fall apart. Dad nodded, his face determined. Mom squeezed my hand. Together, as a unit, I whispered the word. Outside the window, the sun began to rise, painting the city in shades of pink and gold. It was a new day. We survived the night. Now we had to learn how to live again. 2 years passed and our world had changed completely. Life was not perfect, but we were making it work. I was 36 now, and I made a trip to the Texas State Prison each month. My 2 year old son Daniel was on my lap. He had his father's dark, wavy hair and my curious, bright eyes. He always had questions I could not answer yet. On the other side of the glass, David was in a wheelchair. 3 surgeries brought back the use of his hands, but his legs were motionless. He was paralyzed from the waist down. A piece of shrapnel from the explosion had severed his spinal cord. He was in his second year of a 12-year sentence. David spoke quietly, pressing his hand flat against the glass divider. He is getting so big, he said. Daniel copied him, placing his small hand against the thick pane. Da! He yelled. My heart hurt. He knows a few more words now. Dada, Mama, and No. A tired, sad smile touched David's mouth. That sounds about right, he said. Liam sat beside me. He was 9 now and much quieter than other kids his age. Sometimes he joined us for the visits. Other times it was just too much for him. Today was a good day. Hey, buddy, David said to his older son. Hi, Dad, Liam answered. His voice was quiet but steady. I thought about those first weeks when everything felt like a bad dream. I was on bed rest for 2 weeks after the explosion, staring at an ultrasound. The doctor pointed to a spot by the tiny fluttering heart. The bruising is going down, she told me. That is a very good sign. 4 weeks after that, it had vanished. Miss Martinez, you have a little fighter. I started to weep with both relief and shock. Daniel had fought to survive just as I had. He was born in January of 2024. He weighed a healthy 7 pounds, 3 ounces. All the nurses started to call him our little miracle. I held him close, exhausted and sore, but filled with so much love. You fought so hard to get here, I whispered. Thank you. Liam met his new brother 2 days later. He stood by my hospital bed, looking very nervous. You can touch him, it is okay, I said gently. Liam slowly reached out and touched Daniel's tiny hand with one finger. Daniel's fingers wrapped around his, and a real smile lit up Liam's face for the first time in forever. Now, as I watched Daniel press his hand to the glass like his dad, I felt the full weight of the last 2 years. The operations, the therapy, the court dates. We were slowly creating a life that was starting to feel normal. I remember the day they captured Marcus so clearly. I was 6 months pregnant, standing in the living room with my dad, watching the news. Marcus Vulov was on the television, being led up the steps of an airplane in handcuffs, surrounded by federal agents. His face showed no emotion, but his cold eyes swept over the journalists. It looked like he was memorizing every one of them. Carter was speaking at a press conference. He announced, based on a tip from a key witness, David Vulov, Mexican police and the FBI stormed a compound near Puerto Vallarta. Marcus Vulov is now in United States custody and will be prosecuted on federal charges. My father saw my confused look and answered the question I had not asked. On the night of the raid, Marcus got away on a private jet. It was disguised as a medical transport for a sick person. By the time we figured it out, he was already in Mexico. A drug cartel was protecting him in Puerto Vallarta. He thought he was untouchable down there, but David was the one who gave him up. Carter explained everything at the press conference. David provided the villa's address, all the security codes, and every escape route. Without his information, Marcus would probably still be free. Now Marcus would spend the rest of his life behind bars. I sank into a chair, overwhelmed by it all, and rested a hand on my belly. Tears streamed down my cheeks. "It is over," I whispered. "It is finally over." My dad squeezed my shoulder gently. "Not until the trial is done," he said, "but we are almost there." The trial began in October of 2024, a year after it all happened. I was in the courtroom and my 3-month-old son Daniel was asleep in a carrier on me. Marcus Vulov sat at the defense table in a gray suit with his silver hair perfectly in place. He looked more like a CEO than a monster. David testified by video from prison. He looked thinner, but his voice was strong. "My father organized the kidnapping of Linda Martinez. He used my 7-year-old son as a human shield with a bomb to force my cooperation. He ordered me to murder Emma Martinez and her father, Richard Martinez. When I refused, he detonated grenades that permanently disabled me. The jury reached a verdict in just 4 hours, guilty on every count. The judge sentenced him to life in prison with no possibility of parole, plus an additional 80 years. He was headed to ADX Florence in Colorado, a prison for the most dangerous criminals in the country. The judge's voice was like ice. "Mr. Vulov, you turned your own family into weapons. You endangered children. You will now live in a concrete box and the world will be safer for it." Marcus's face stayed empty, but as the guards led him out, his eyes fixed on the video screen showing David. His lips formed two words that no one else heard. "You are dead." I could see on the screen that David felt both pain and release. He was free from his father. 2 years passed. I stood watching David speak to his sons from behind thick glass. I felt a sense of calm. It was not forgiveness, but something like peace. That Sunday, we gathered at my parents' house. Liam helped my mom with the dinner plates while I gave Daniel some baby food. My dad pulled a heavy pot from the oven, but the lid fell, crashing loudly on the floor. Liam froze up immediately. He clapped his hands over his ears and started breathing fast, his eyes full of terror. I knelt beside him right away. In a soft voice, I said, "Liam, look here, let us count. 1, 2, 3. His breathing began to even out. 4, 5, 6. "You are doing great. You are safe. It was only a lid. You are all right." He nodded slowly and lowered his hands. "I am sorry," he whispered. Loud sounds were still a struggle for him. "I know, my love," I told him. "You are being so brave." Later, as we cleaned the kitchen, Liam asked softly, "Will I be broken like Dad, since I have post-traumatic stress disorder?" I got down to his level and looked into his eyes. "You are not broken. You are getting better. Scars show you lived through something hard. You will be a strong and courageous man, Liam, I promise." He looked at me and asked, "Daniel almost died, did he not?" His question caught me off guard. "Yes, that is true. The doctors were worried after all that happened, but he was a little warrior who pulled through, just like you are now." Liam looked at his baby brother and his face softened. "He is a tough little guy," Liam said. "Just like his big brother," I answered. Later that night, with Daniel fast asleep, I checked my email. An official message from the prison bureau was waiting. It was about Marcus Vulov. His status was inmate. His location was the Supermax prison in Florence, Colorado. His security was listed as maximum. Parole was not an option. His sentence was life, with no chance of ever getting out. I showed the email to my dad. "He is in ADX Florence. That is where they put the most dangerous people." My dad nodded. "El Chapo is there. The Unabomber and the Boston Marathon bomber, too. Marcus is one of them now." "Are we safe?" I had to ask. My dad looked at Daniel sleeping in his crib. "Completely safe? I cannot say that. Marcus knew a lot of powerful people. One of his old associates could try to finish his work." "But Marcus himself?" I asked. My dad met my gaze. "He is 67 years old. He spends 23 hours a day alone in a tiny cell. He will die in there. So yes, we are far safer than we were 2 years ago." I slowly nodded. For the moment, that was enough. That evening, I sat on the porch with my coffee, watching the Austin stars. I reflected on everything my family had survived. Marcus was in a concrete box for good. Still, I kept the cameras and the panic buttons. Police could be here in 90 seconds. It was not because of Marcus. It was because an old friend of his might want payback. Carter had warned me. "We chopped the head off the snake. but its body might still twitch for a bit. But even so, the certainty that Marcus would perish in that cell gave me my first real breath of relief. I looked up at the stars, my hand resting on my stomach out of habit, though Daniel is a happy 2-year-old now. This is not the life I planned, but it is my own, and Marcus Vulov will never harm my family again. Looking back, this story is not about payback or betrayal. It is about breaking a vicious cycle that ruins families. For 15 years, Marcus weaponized his grief to manipulate his son. David was caught between loyalty to his father and his love for me. He faced an impossible choice. He could end my life or see his own child perish. I nearly became another casualty in a bitter family war. I almost lost my parents, my husband, and my baby. It was all because one man chose vengeance over forgiveness. David did not betray us out of hatred. He did it because of fear and years of abuse. This taught me a powerful lesson. Never allow someone else's rage to become your prison. Do not expect perfection from those you love, but love them through their flaws. More than anything, I am grateful for second chances. I am grateful my son is healthy and alive. I am grateful my mother chose courage over fear to uncover the truth. And I am grateful David shot a television, not me. I hope you can take something away from my painful experience. Do not overlook red flags simply because you are in love. It is good to trust, but it is wise to verify things for yourself. If my story moved you, please let me know in the comments. What would you do if you discovered your parent had faked their death? Please share this with others and subscribe to our channel. Your support is everything to us. Thank you for staying with my story until the end. One final note, future stories might include fictional elements to better illustrate a point. If that is not for you, please feel free to check out another video. Take care.